Chapter 498. After learning of their plan, Jing Xingji became excited. Both Emotienga and Qin were quiet people. Although being trapped in the underground palace was a bit uncomfortable, it wasn't like they couldn't endure it. Jing Xingji, on the other hand, was different. Aside from meditating and practicing his swordsmanship, what he loved the most was strolling around. Sometimes he would just stroll around the underground palace, but sometimes he would take risks and leave the underground palace. Because of the existence of that refined corpse, he had to be very careful every time he left the underground palace. It was very unpleasant. Now that there was a way to trap the refined corpse, he was very proactive. For the sake of this plan, the three of them had made many preparations. Emotienga spent a lot of money and used crystal jades to make many core formation realm puppets. Needless to say, Qin was drawing illusory spiritual talismans every day. As for Jing Xingji, he went everywhere with Feifei to look for suitable locations. Feifei was very familiar with the Immortal Palace, so she quickly selected a few locations for Jing Xingji to investigate. Obviously, this on-the-spot investigation was the most dangerous part, but it was also the part that didn't require any capital. Jing Xingji muttered a few words, then obediently went. Who asked him to not know how to use mechanisms or draw talismans? Moreover, he was reluctant to part with those crystal jades, so he might as well sell his labor. After several months, they finally decided on a valley. This valley was located at the very edge of the restriction of the Immortal Palace. It occupied a large area, but the spiritual qi was not strong. There were only a few deserted caves scattered around. Jing Xingji went in and explored it. It should be the residence of some low-level cultivators, and there were not too many valuable things. Most importantly, this valley was naturally closed, and there were cliffs on both sides. There was no need to modify it, and it could be used. By this time, Emotienga had already made more than 10 puppets, spending a lot of crystal jades on them. These puppets were used to lure the refined corpse, so it was impossible to retrieve them. However, in order to get out of the underground chamber, Zhang Xian couldn't care less about these losses. She had already obtained enough things from the Immortal Palace. Losing some was nothing. Qin's illusionary talisman was rather difficult. He had only begun to learn the art of talisman crafting when he was in the core formation realm. Although he was rather talented, it wasn't that easy to make high-level illusionary talismans. In order to raise the grade of the illusionary talisman, he put down everything and focused on crafting talismans. After wasting a lot of talisman paper and beast blood, when he was almost out of materials, he finally managed to draw enough illusionary spirit talismans for his use. Everything was ready, and the corpse trapping operation finally began. At the exit of the underground palace, Feifei poked her head out and looked around. After making sure that there was no danger, she carefully crawled out. Behind him, Jing Xingji muttered, "Are you sure the refined corpse isn't nearby? It would be terrible if this entrance was discovered." Feifei raised her head and bit the hem of his sleeve to show her dissatisfaction. Then she turned around and led the way. Emotienga and Qin were next. Although they could control the puppets in the underground palace with their divine senses, it was still better for them to do it themselves. 3 humans and 1 beast had concealment talismans stuck on their bodies. Under Feifei's lead, they soon found the refined corpse. The refined corpse was wandering along the mountain path. When it came to a dead end, it would randomly change directions. The 3 of them observed it for a while, but all they saw was that it didn't know how to cross the obstacles. "Have you chosen your route?" Jing Xingji asked. Emotienga nodded, then took out the puppets one by one from her Qingquan ring. These puppets were lined up in a row, and there were more than 10 of them. Each of them was the size of a real person, and they stood there quietly. Emotienga then took out more than 10 crystal jades from her robe and opened the abdomen of the puppets. There was a small groove inside which a crystal jade could be inserted. Jing Xingji's eyes were filled with envy. "So many crystal jades. You're really willing to?" Emotienga rolled her eyes at him. "I'm not willing to. Take them out." Jing Xingji immediately shut his mouth. He knew that some time ago, her spiritual beasts and puppets plundered the entire Immortal Palace. He even had a dark suspicion that the two of them had planned this beforehand. They only proposed this plan after they plundered all the good things in the immortal palace. When the time came, they would deal with the refined corpse, leaving him with some leftovers. However, he only thought about it in his heart. In any case, it was Emotienga who had this method. He didn't have a clever spiritual beast, didn't know how to make puppets, and he was even more reluctant to give up crystal jades. He could only accept his bad luck. After the crystal jades were inserted, the more than 10 unconscious puppets suddenly changed and emitted the aura of a core formation cultivator. Emotienga said, 5 puppets per person. That won't be a problem, right? To control these puppets, they needed to use their divine sense to set restrictions. The stronger their divine sense was, the more puppets they could control. Although she had the soul-refining art, her accuracy wasn't enough to control more than 10 puppets at once. After the 3 of them controlled the puppets, she took out a stack of illusionary talismans and distributed them to each puppet. Controlling the puppets to use the talismans was a bit difficult. Fortunately, their divine senses weren't weak, and they'd tried it many times, so it wasn't a big problem. After making all the preparations, Emotienga took a deep breath and said, "I'll go first." She took a step forward, and with a move of her divine sense, the puppet next to her flew up lightly. The puppet landed next to the refined corpse, but the refined corpse didn't notice it at all. This puppet only had slight spiritual aura fluctuations and didn't have any vitality, so it couldn't attract the refined corpse's attention at all. Emotienga controlled the puppet and slowly widened the distance between it and the refined corpse. Jing Xingji took the risk to test this distance. The refined corpse could sense vitality within a radius of several miles. When it was almost there, the puppet moved its fingertips, and an illusionary talisman was ignited. The instantaneous movement attracted the refined corpse's attention. The refined corpse, which had been wandering for several years, finally found a target. It stomped its feet and chased after the puppet. With the fluctuations from the burning illusionary talisman on its body, the puppet quickly fled in the direction of the valley, according to its original route. However, the speed of a core formation puppet was limited. It only persisted for the time it took for an incense stick to burn before the refined corpse caught up and smashed it into pieces. Upon seeing this, Emotienga immediately sent out a summoning talisman. During this time, Qinshi had already controlled the puppet to the predetermined location. As soon as he received the summoning talisman, he also let the puppet activate an illusionary talisman and continued to run along the predetermined route. Jing Xingji, on the other hand, had already taken the puppet to the next location. The 3 of them divided the work like this. As soon as they received the summoning talisman, they activated the illusionary talisman and controlled the puppet to run along the predetermined route towards the valley. When it was overtaken, it immediately sent a summoning talisman to the next person and then rushed to the next location. The whole thing wasn't difficult, but it required a high degree of tacit understanding between the 3 people. If there was a slight mistake, the refined corpse might deviate from the predetermined route and mess up the steps. This also required a high level of divine sense from the 3 people. Controlling 5 puppets wasn't a simple matter in itself. They also had to rush to the right location at the right time and activate the illusionary talisman at that moment to try to prolong the time it took for the refined corpse to catch up. Nevertheless, they were well prepared and had experimented several times before. Occasionally, accidents happen, but they managed to pull the refined corpse back to the predetermined route in time. The first puppet, the second puppet. One puppet after another was smashed by the refined corpse, and the distance between the refined corpse and the valley was getting closer and closer. Finally, the last puppet Emotienga controlled reached the edge of the valley and jumped down. The refined corpse chased after it, and also followed it without any hesitation. When the 3 people and 1 beast met outside the valley, Emotienga shouted, "Set up the formation!" Feifei immediately turned around and ran while taking out high-grade spirit stones from its storage space. With several popping sounds, it inserted the spirit stones into the formation that had already been set up. Buzz! With a clear sound, Several clear lights lit up the surroundings of the valley and shot towards the center. The clear lights converged above the valley and instantly turned into a transparent shield, covering the entire valley. Seeing that the formation was activated, Emotienga breathed a sigh of relief and looked down. With the concealment talisman on them, the refined corpse couldn't sense their existence at this distance, so they could observe the situation without worry. The puppet she controlled was smashed by the refined corpse's claw when it fell into the valley. At this moment, the refined corpse that had lost its target was wandering in the valley. The three people observed it attentively. Although they successfully led the refined corpse into the valley, they still had to see if it really wouldn't fly out of the valley before it could be considered a success. This refined corpse's cultivation level was too high. The formation outside the valley could only isolate part of its aura and make its senses slow, but it couldn't prevent it from leaving the valley or seal its ability to sense aura. An hour later, the refined corpse touched the mountain wall and turned in another direction, showing no intention of flying out of the valley. The three people finally relaxed their tense nerves. This was a deification realm refined corpse. If anything went wrong, they would lose their lives. We're finally safe. Jing Xingji wiped the sweat from his forehead. Yes, we can move out of the underground palace. Emotienga looked up at the immortal palace inside. Living outside is much more comfortable than living in the underground palace. After they finished talking, they turned around and saw that Qin was still observing the valley attentively. What are you doing? Still worried? Jing Xingji patted his shoulder. Qin shook his head and didn't answer. Instead, he controlled the remaining puppet to jump down. This puppet didn't activate the illusionary talisman, so the refined corpse turned a blind eye to it. It easily approached the refined corpse. The valley was very deep. Even cultivators couldn't clearly see the scene below, so they could only sense it with their divine senses. Sensing that Qin was controlling the puppet to touch the refined corpse's right hand, Emotienga suddenly understood. The interspatial ring. This refined corpse was originally a deification realm cultivator, so it naturally had an interspatial ring. After it became a refined corpse, no one dared to approach it, so the interspatial ring was intact on its hand. Almost all the immortals' caves of the deification realm cultivators in the immortal palace had been searched, so this interspatial ring might be the only intact one. Realizing what Qin was doing, Jing Xingji became excited. Quick, get that interspatial ring off. Let's divide the loot. Most of the items in the interspatial ring they got from Master Taoist Yuanmu had been taken away, but there were still so many treasures. If it was an intact interspatial ring, how many treasures would it contain? Qin didn't answer him. He was still focused on controlling the puppet. Finally, the puppet rubbed the interspatial ring off the refined corpse's hand, but at the same time, the refined corpse seemed to feel someone was disturbing it. It waved its arm, and the puppet shattered. The interspatial ring fell into the grass. Qin heaved a sigh of relief and turned to look at Jing Xingji. What are you standing there for? Quickly pick it up. Out of the 15 puppets, only one was left under Jing Xingji's control. Jing Xingji surprisingly didn't object to his tone. He controlled the last puppet to jump down the valley and pick up the interspatial ring. Chapter 499. After picking up the interspatial ring and making sure the refined corpse wouldn't come out again, the three people and one beast returned to the underground palace. Sure enough, there were a lot of good things in the interspatial ring. Not to mention the high-grade spirit stones and crystal jades. There were medicinal pills, materials, magic weapons, and so on. After more than 100,000 years, the medicinal pills and spiritual plants had almost lost their spiritual aura and were of no value. Jing Xingji picked some materials related to sword nurturing and gave the rest to Qin and Emotienga. The three of them divided the magic weapons equally. Even if they didn't need them, they could sell them for spirit stones. The cultivation technique jade slips could be duplicated, so each of them had one copy. Finally, there were the high-grade spirit stones and crystal jades. Since Jing Xingji gave up most of the materials, he got some more. Finally, there was the interspatial ring. Emotienga and Qin already had it, so they gave it to Jing Xingji. Unfortunately, they didn't find the token for the storehouse in the interspatial ring. However, even if they had the token, it would be difficult for them to enter again. The restriction outside the storehouse would automatically repair itself. In the past few years, it had already been restored to its original state. With their cultivation levels, it would be difficult for them to break it. In any case, the interspatial ring was already an amazing wealth. The three of them each got something. Not only did they make up for the corpse trapping operation, but they also made a lot of money. Everyone was happy. Then they put away the things, informed Yang Qingji, and left the underground palace. Yang Qingji practiced the primordial devil art, so the most suitable place for cultivation was still the original cave. Therefore, he still did closed-door meditation in the cave, and didn't plan to go out. As for Mo Tiange, Qin Shi, and Jing Xingji, after leaving the underground palace, they found abandoned immortals' caves full of spiritual aura, according to the demarcated safe area, and settled down separately. There was no shortage of immortals' caves full of spiritual aura in this immortal palace. The best ones were naturally those on isolated peaks. These immortals' caves originally belonged to deification cultivators. Several years ago, when they entered the immortal palace, the restrictions on the immortals' caves were almost cracked by those nascent soul cultivators. And the good things were basically swept away. They didn't have to spend much effort to repair the immortals' caves and rearrange the restrictions. Then they could live there. Out of the 15 core formation puppets they worked hard to make, 14 were destroyed. Mo Tiange was very distressed. Later, she went to find the wreckage and repaired it. Mo Tiange put 2 of them into the virtual sky world to replace the 2 destroyed stone sculpture puppets. As for the other one, it stayed outside to serve tea and handle chores. Mo Tiange ordered the puppets to tidy up the main cultivation room. She was very satisfied when she looked at the neat and tidy immortals' cave. The cave they chose was located on the highest peak of the immortal palace. It was remote and very quiet. Once they left the cave, they could see the entire immortal palace. The scenery was extremely beautiful. The only drawback was that the spiritual qi here was slightly lacking, and the cave abode was also slightly smaller. No matter how small the cave abode was, it was still the residence of the sect's deity transformation stage elders. It had all the necessary cultivation rooms. It was just that the disciples did not live in a big place. As for the spiritual qi, it was even more unnecessary. How could the spiritual qi in this immortal palace be lacking? Besides, once they left the underground palace, Missouri Tiange would enter closed-door meditation to form her nascent soul. So the 2 of them would definitely enter the virtual sky world. What happened outside didn't really matter. After she settled down, she didn't immediately enter closed-door meditation. Forming one's nascent soul wasn't a trivial matter. A little carelessness could lead to irreversible consequences. If she couldn't form her nascent soul when her core shattered, her 100 years of cultivation would go down the drain. Therefore, in addition to Mo Yaoqing and Fu Yaozi's cultivation experiences, Qin Shi also recalled the situation when he formed his nascent soul and carefully summarized some details for reference. As for Mo Tiange, she was comprehending her state of mind. When her state of mind was calm, and she was sure there were no mistakes, she would enter closed-door meditation again. A phoenix cry came from outside, followed by the breath of a spiritual beast. Mo Tiange stood up and went out of the cave. She saw Qin Shi feeding a dazzling bird medicinal pills. "Is this your dazzling bird?" The bird in front of her was about 3 feet long. Its whole body was red and bright like flames. Its long tail feathers were extremely gorgeous, very similar to a phoenix's tail. The most peculiar thing was that the bird had 2 eyeballs in each of its eyes, so it was called a dazzling bird. The dazzling bird was a very rare kind of spiritual beast. Not only was it good at using fire magic, but it also had extraordinary strength. Among spiritual beasts of the same rank, it was very powerful. According to ancient records, the dazzling bird had part of the phoenix's bloodline, and was a branch of the divine beasts from the distant past era. It also had the effect of warding off evil. Mo Tiange remembered that Qin Shi obtained this dazzling bird when he was still in the foundation building realm, and had raised it for 200 years. However, like most cultivators, The spiritual beasts they raised couldn't keep up with their cultivation levels, and couldn't help them in fights of magical power. So he rarely brought it with him. When she left, this dazzling bird was only in the 5th rank, but now it was already in the 7th rank. If it advanced again, it would be an 8th rank spiritual beast, which was equivalent to a nascent soul cultivator. She fed the last beast spirit pill to the dazzling bird, then patted its head. The dazzling bird let out a cry, spread its wings and flew into the air. He said, "Thanks to the beast spirit pills you left behind, this dazzling bird advanced 2 ranks in more than 50 years. In a few dozen years, it'll probably advance to the 8th rank." Really? Looking at the dazzling bird flying in the air, she was very envious. It's really strange. Your dazzling bird can smoothly advance from the 5th rank to the 7th rank, but Fei and the others ate so many medicinal pills, but none of them advanced? She smiled. Don't you think about how old they are? I've raised this dazzling bird for at least 200 years. Although I'm not as extravagant as you, I still fed it a lot of medicinal pills. How long have Fei and Xiaohua been with you? In my opinion, although spiritual beasts don't have as many bottlenecks as human cultivators, their lifespans are amazing, so they often need to accumulate energy for a long time. Maybe when they advance to the 5th rank, they need to accumulate energy. Look at Xiaofan the sea dragon. It's the oldest, but hasn't it already cultivated to the peak of the 5th rank? I reckon it can advance to the 6th rank soon. Mo Tinga thought about it and agreed. Although Fei and Xiaohua were spiritual beasts she got a long time ago, they had only cultivated for a little more than 100 years. As for Xiaofan, although it hadn't been with her for long, it was already more than 800 years old. It was usually the most well-behaved, unlike Fei and Xiaohua, who dared to eat any spiritual plants. But among the 3 spiritual beasts it cultivated the fastest. Presumably, Qinxi's words about accumulating energy were somewhat reasonable. By the way, do you still remember the blood-eating vine? Speaking of spiritual beasts, Mo Tinga suddenly remembered this thing. When they first entered the Immortal Palace, they passed by a forest of blood-eating vines. Fu Yaozi said that these things fed on spiritual beasts, and were also great supplements for them. So they cut a lot of them, and put them in their Qingquan bags. Of course I remember. I also plan to use this thing to try to help the dazzling bird advance to the 8th rank. You can also see if these blood-eating vines can help your spiritual beasts break through their bottlenecks. Without hesitation, the 2 of them took out the blood-eating vines they cut, and distributed them to their spiritual beasts. When the 4 spiritual beasts saw the blood-eating vines, they were like cats seeing fish. Their reactions were surprisingly similar, and they all pounced on them to eat. Mo Tinga was curious and asked Fei, "Is this thing delicious?" Fei nodded vigorously while busily gnawing on it. It had always been very concerned about its image, so there weren't many times when it didn't care about its demeanor. She asked Xiaofan again, "Xiaofan, do you recognize this thing?" Xiaofan was more well-behaved than Fei. Upon hearing her question, it stopped and answered, "I don't know, but it smells delicious. I feel comfortable eating it, and my spiritual aura circulates very fast." Oh, it seemed this was the intuition of spiritual beasts. "The 3 of you, don't eat too much at once," she warned them, and left the virtual sky world. Inside the cave, Qinxi was sitting in front of a table. Beside him were piles of medicinal pills, magic weapons, and sundries. There were also several Qingquan bags on the table. Upon seeing this, Mo Tinga raised her eyebrows. "What are you doing? You took out all your belongings?" Qinxi shook the Qingquan ring in his hand and said, "With this thing, I don't need a Qingquan bag anymore." They obtained a Qingquan ring from the deification ancient cultivator in the first cave on the top of ascetic cliff. Later, Master Taoist Yuanmu gave them another Qingquan ring during the negotiation. Together with the Qingquan ring in the hands of the deification refined corpse, they had exactly 1 Qingquan ring for each of Jing Xingji's group. Qingquan rings were many times more advanced than Qingquan bags. In the current cultivation world, the most advanced Qingquan bags were made from the fur under the belly of high-rank spiritual beasts. High-rank spiritual beasts had a unique storage space with a very large capacity. Ordinary Qianquan bags, on the other hand, were actually large bags sewn from animal skins and made to look very small using the technique of space. Qianquan rings were different. They were made using the distant past era space-tearing technique. The space inside was not only large, but also independent. It was especially suitable for storing spiritual plants, medicinal pills, and other things that needed to preserve spiritual aura. Qianquan bags couldn't compare at all. Moreover, even if a restriction was placed on a Qianquan bag, it was very easy to remove. The Qianquan ring, on the other hand, was different. A more complicated restriction could be placed on it. If the cultivation level of the person who obtained it wasn't high enough, they couldn't open it. Unless the owner died, the restriction would weaken until it dissipated. Most importantly, how could taking things out of a Qianquan bag be more convenient than using a Qianquan ring? For high-rank cultivators like them, taking magic weapons out of a Qianquan bag would take time no matter how fast they were, and it would be easy for the enemy to see them. Qianquan rings, on the other hand, didn't need to be worn directly on their fingers. Their spiritual aura could move at will, and they could take out magic weapons unknowingly and catch the enemy off guard. The two of them obtained a lot of things from the Immortal Palace. Because Jing Xingji was beside them, they didn't have time to properly tidy them up. Now that they finally had an independent Immortal's Cave, it was a good time to take inventory. Seeing this, Mo Tiange also took out all her things from the Qianquan bag, tidied them up, and put them into the Qianquan ring. During this process, she discovered that the Qianquan bag could actually be directly put into the Qianquan ring. It was impossible to put a Qianquan bag into another Qianquan bag. However, the Qianquan ring was an independent space, so it could put a Qianquan bag inside. Such leisurely days passed by for several months. After Qin Shi explained his soul formation experience to Mo Tiange one by one, the two of them tidied up, laid a formation restriction, and prepared to enter closed-door meditation. If there were no accidents, they wouldn't come out of closed-door meditation until Mo Tiange formed her nascent soul. It was unknown how long this process would take, maybe 3 to 5 years, maybe 10 years. During this time, with Jing Xingji and Yang Qingji here, someone had to preside over this immortal's cave outside. As for soul formation, they couldn't be careless. If there was a nascent soul cultivator by their side, it would be a lot safer. So Qin Shi had to enter the virtual sky world. Fortunately, although Feifei was a spiritual beast, it was half as smart as a person. With its spiritual intelligence, it wouldn't be a problem to leave the immortal's cave to it. After a brief discussion, the two of them left the outside matters to Feifei and entered the virtual sky world. Chapter 500. The two of them already had experience with entering closed-door meditation in the virtual sky world to form their nascent souls. It had only been 60 to 70 years since the last time Qin Shi advanced to the nascent soul realm, so the preparations this time were very easy. Mo Tiange laid a spirit-gathering formation around the closed-door meditation room. Qin Shi had long finished concocting the medicinal pill she needed. They didn't have any special methods to increase their chances of advancing to the nascent soul realm, but the art of Sinew and Taiyuan record were top-grade cultivation techniques. Coupled with the environment of the distant past era in the virtual sky world, and the spiritual pills concocted from 10,000-year-old spiritual plants, their chances of advancing to the nascent soul realm were already very high. Tiange, after you enter closed-door meditation, don't try to form your nascent soul right away. First, carefully recall everyone's soul formation experiences and experience their realms. Once you understand everything, you can circulate your spiritual aura and try to break through to the nascent soul realm. Mo Tiange complied one by one. After she finished preparing everything, she entered the closed-door meditation room. She sat cross-legged in the seclusion room and activated the spirit-gathering array. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She still remembered when Qin Shi formed his nascent soul. She once boasted shamelessly about how she had the aptitude that was hard to come by in 1,000 years, and the fated chance that was hard to come by in 10,000 years. So why couldn't she become the youngest nascent soul cultivator in the history of the celestial pole? Today, she was merely 160 years old. She was already at the peak of the completion level, and was about to break through to the original level. She smiled and stopped sighing in her heart. This sentence was actually just a joke. Although she was confident she could form her nascent soul, she never cared about the time. What was important about forming the nascent soul sooner or later? Ever since she set foot on the path to immortality, she never gave up on herself. Every step she took was steady, which was much more important than becoming the youngest nascent soul cultivator in the celestial pole. Concealing his spirit in chi, he calmed his mind and easily entered a meditative state. Everything around him was gone. Nothing could be seen, nothing could be heard, nothing could be felt. She felt as if she had returned to her mother's embrace. It was warm, serene, tranquil, until it disappeared. Gradually, even his heart melted in this kind of nothingness. He couldn't find himself, yet he was everywhere. Where am I? She asked herself, but her surroundings were empty, as if even time and space did not exist. This kind of nothingness that didn't even exist was so frightening when she was awake. But at this moment, she was very calm, so calm that she didn't even think about finding out the reason, because this kind of nothingness made her feel a sense of tranquility and fulfillment that she had never felt before. In the empty void, a speck of light finally appeared. The light grew brighter and brighter, slowly enlarging until she saw people and objects. This was a small village under the jurisdiction of Lianqing in Jing country, in the secular world. There were only about 300 to 400 people in total. Everyone had only one surname, so this village was named Mo's village after their surnames. In the vast territory of Jin State, there were countless small villages like this one. They were inconspicuous, but this was the only place that had a different meaning to her. Her lonely and happy childhood. The people she had loved and hated flashed before her eyes one by one. Then came the 10 years of wandering from place to place, suffering all the bullying and injustice. At that time, she always thought that when she succeeded in her cultivation in the future, she would definitely seek revenge on them. She would ruthlessly step on their faces and look at their terrified expressions, and she would feel extremely carefree. However, when he possessed such power, he realized that he no longer cared about all of this. Those bullying and unfairness had made her furious and gnash her teeth. If those people appeared in front of her, she had no doubt that she would kill them with a wave of her hand. But even so, she would not deliberately seek revenge, because she had a higher goal. In front of this goal, those people who once held grudges in her heart were insignificant. It was as if humans were as insignificant as ants in front of her. This goal was called the path of immortality. In the distant past era, when heaven and earth were first separated, gods came to the world, and demonic spirits appeared. Insignificant humans struggled with birth, aging, illness, and death. They yearned for the power to move mountains and drain seas, just like demonic spirits or even gods. Thus cultivation came into being. What was cultivation? It was the vain desire of mortals to jump out of samsara, live forever, and conquer the heavens. Millions of years passed. From the vast and boundless primeval times to the chaos of the present day, countless people began to tread the path of immortality. They struggled within the Tao of immortality. But the only ones who managed to escape the cycle of reincarnation and become true immortals were legends. Did the path of immortality really exist? Or was it to say, in the end, they were still a pile of bones that scattered with the wind? A painful expression appeared on Emotienga's face, but she couldn't feel it. Ever since she entered the closed-door meditation room, Qin Shi, who had been guarding outside the door, watched her nervously. Everyone encountered different situations when they tried to form their nascent soul. He didn't know what Emotienga's mental state had experienced, but he knew he couldn't intervene. If she couldn't even pass the initial mental state, there was no need for her to form her nascent soul. She'd already failed. On the path of cultivation, aura refining was the rudiments, foundation building was the threshold, and core formation was the initial success. Only when one formed their nascent soul could they be considered to have truly set foot on the path of immortality and come into contact with the true meaning of immortality. Therefore, to break through to the nascent soul realm, aptitude was no longer that important. Cultivation level, temperament, and personal understanding were more important. Because of this, even those disciples of famous cultivation groups with great cultivators as their backing could only use medicinal pills to reach the core formation realm at most. They couldn't cross the hurdle of forming their nascent soul. Only by comprehending the profound meaning of immortality could one become a true great cultivator. What is the path of immortality? To seek power and not be controlled by others. A woman appeared in Emotienga's mental state and said faintly. She had a dignified appearance and a calm expression. She was just casually standing there, but she was already astonishingly beautiful. She was Emo Yaoqing, born in Danxia sect in Yunzhong 5,000 years ago. She had a pure Yin constitution, and her talent and beauty were equally astonishing. Beauty and pure Yin constitution. These two perfectly combined on her body, causing her a lifetime of misfortune. No one saw the overflowing talent beneath her superior aptitude, and no one saw the firm Tao heart behind her beauty. In order to escape her fate, she crippled her own cultivation level and started from zero. She put in 10 times, or even 10 times the effort and hardships of others to enter the nascent soul realm. Emotienga recalled herself. She was once an ignorant child, but because of a sentence she inadvertently said, she was kidnapped. When she was young, a moment of carelessness not only brought disaster to herself, but also implicated innocent people. What is the path of immortality? To seek power and not be controlled by others. What is the path of immortality? To seek longevity and to explore the true meaning of the world. This time a vague figure appeared. His face couldn't be seen clearly, and his figure couldn't be distinguished. Only his clear and quiet voice could be heard. This was Fu Yaozi, the #1 cultivator in Yunzhong, for more than 100,000 years. He was a maverick individual cultivator, a legendary genius cultivator, who advanced into the deification realm. In his life, he didn't have many misfortunes, but he was full of ups and downs, and every step he took was extremely difficult. He was considered to have a waste spiritual route, had no wealth, and had no backing. He could only rely on his own 2 legs to advance step by step on the path of immortality. But even so, he never gave up. From an insignificant little aura refining cultivator, he went through countless difficulties and dangers, successfully built his foundation, and entered the threshold of the cultivation world. Later, he obtained an incomplete art of the origin. Relying on his firm Tao heart and intelligence, he advanced step by step on the path of immortality. But after he became a great cultivator, he didn't become arrogant at all. He still diligently explored the path of immortality. What is Tao? What is human? What is heaven and earth? Where does Tao come from? Where does human go? Where is the end of heaven and earth? Can insignificant human beings really have the power to change heaven and earth? And where does the gate of eternal life open? What is the path of immortality? To seek immortality, to explore the true meaning of the world. Countless people and countless things kept appearing in Emotienga's mind. Questions, doubts, and eventually calmness. The spiritual aura in the closed-door meditation room gradually stabilized. Outside the closed-door meditation room, Qin took a deep breath. Finally, she passed the first hurdle. He had failed to form his nascent soul 3 times, and every time, he failed at the first hurdle. This hurdle wasn't too dangerous, but it was a crucial hurdle on the way to the nascent soul realm. Only with a firm belief could she continue walking on the path of immortality. If she hesitated for even a moment, she wouldn't be able to move forward. After an unknown amount of time, Emotienga opened her eyes. She felt her heart was as calm as still water, and she took the medicinal pills she prepared one by one. After she took all the medicinal pills, a powerful spiritual aura burst out of her body. She didn't panic and slowly guided the spiritual aura to move in her body. Yin and Yang were Tai Chi, and the combination of the 5 elements was primal chaos. Everything in this world, as long as it was alive, couldn't escape from Yin, Yang, and the 5 elements. Mastering Yin Yang and the 5 elements meant mastering the world. Qin. She stood motionlessly outside the closed-door meditation room, feeling the fluctuating spiritual aura. This was the second hurdle of soul formation, and it was also the most dangerous hurdle. During this process, the body would absorb countless spiritual auras, and if the meridians and dantian could withstand the test, their gold core would shatter, and they would form their nascent soul. If their gold core shattered but couldn't withstand the test, they wouldn't be able to form their nascent soul. In that case, hundreds of years of cultivation would go down the drain. He waited quietly. If an accident happened, he would stop her, protect her gold core, and preserve her cultivation. Nascent soul could be tried again, but once her gold core shattered, everything would be irreparable, and she would have to start all over again. But what made him feel strange was that although everything in the closed-door meditation room was stable and countless spiritual auras were rushing into Emotienga's body, the moment her gold core shattered, and she would form her nascent soul didn't come. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, time passed quickly, and everything in the closed-door meditation room seemed to have stopped. This made Qinshi very puzzled, but he couldn't think of anything. During the soul formation process, if other people intervened, it could easily lead to a tragedy. Right now, aside from taking too long, everything was normal for Emotienga. If he rashly intervened, he might end up making a fool of himself. After all, when it came to soul formation, everyone had different experiences. His own soul formation process could only be used as a reference. There are also people who take more than 10 years to form their nascent soul. Maybe that's what happened to Emotienga. He could only guess like this. Inside the closed-door meditation room, Emotienga was already immersed in the cycle of yin and yang, and the alternation of the 5 elements. She had no idea that someone was restless outside. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, time didn't stop in the slightest. Chapter 501. Misty clouds and immortal qi lingered. Between the towering peaks, sword light flashed from time to time. Sometimes sword qi soared into the sky, and other times sword intent was threatening. This lasted for half a day. In midair in the clouds, Jing Xingji casually withdrew his flying sword. He looked with satisfaction at the brilliant and incomparably sharp flying sword in his hand. This was the ownerless sword that he obtained from an ancient immortal mansion when he built his foundation. Until today, he still did not know what precious material this sword was made of. But after recognizing its master and nourishing it for more than 200 years, the sword was connected with his mind, sharper and sharper, and the sword intent was stronger and stronger. He still remembered that more than 200 years ago, when he obtained this sword, his master, who was still alive, said that this sword was as clear as autumn water and contained sword qi, so it was better to call it still water sword. In fact, although he seemed to be playing around with the world, he would rather break than bend, and was not suitable for the sword name at all. However, he understood what his master meant. He hoped that he would restrain his edge, so as not to provoke disaster. Unfortunately, at that time he was young and aggressive, and did not understand these things. Later he had no chance. After the death of his master, he endured for 100 years in the ancient sword sect, but in the end he could not endure it. The still water sword was called still water, but he had cultivated it into a sword of swift and fierce killing intent. But he did not regret it. What was the use of enduring? In this world, strength was everything. With strength, one could be above others. He did not have the opportunity of Qin Shoujing and Emo Qingwei, but in this immortal palace, he also obtained a lot of good things. Just high-grade spirit stones alone, after 20 years of unscrupulous cultivation, he still had tens of thousands of pieces, which was almost an unimaginable wealth outside. In the world of immortal cultivation, middle grade and above spirit stones were rare. Even Yuanying stage cultivators, on weekdays, mostly used low-grade or middle-grade spirit stones to trade, and kept high-grade spirit stones for their own use. Ordinary Yuanying stage cultivators, most of their transactions were in the tens of thousands, and their total net worth was only 1 million or so. Tens of thousands of high-grade spirit stones were equivalent to hundreds of millions of low-grade spirit stones. This made him sigh. Ancient times were ancient times, and high-grade spirit stones were not valuable. Unfortunately, Although this huge immortal palace was also made of high-grade spirit stones, there were restrictions. Otherwise, he really wanted to move a spirit stone house back. However, although high-grade spirit stones were rare, they could not be compared to crystal jades. He was not proficient in miscellaneous knowledge, so he gave up the materials in exchange for crystal jades. He used the secret method of sword cultivators to refine these crystal jades into the still water sword. After 20 years of nourishment, the still water sword, which was originally filled with killing intent, became even sharper. In his view, it was not inferior to the wind feather sword. The only cultivator of the ancient sword sect at the late Yuan stage, venerable swordsman Yuanying, who was known as the best sword in the world. Thinking of this, he could not help but look towards the northeast. There was also a lone peak there, quietly sitting in the corner of the immortal palace. Speaking of which, it was strange. It had been 20 years. What were Qin Shoujing and Imo Qingwei doing? Unexpectedly, he did not even take a step out of the cave. Even if he went to visit, he would just send his spirit beast to send him away. He knew that after leaving the underground palace, Missouri Qingwei would go into seclusion to form her nascent soul. But even so, it shouldn't be to the extent of not seeing her for 20 years, right? The little devil cultivator in the underground palace had already reached the peak stage of the core formation realm and was planning to enter secluded meditation to form his nascent soul. Besides, she was in seclusion, so why didn't Qin Shoujing go out? When it came to forming one's nascent soul, no one else could help. Could it be that they were having a good time here and forgot to go out? This thought suddenly popped up in Jing Xingji's mind, and then he felt that he was thinking too much. No matter how good this immortal palace was, it was useless if they couldn't get out. They would not be stupid. But why didn't they appear for 20 years? Did Imo Qingwei succeed in forming her nascent soul? With a stomach full of questions, he wanted to go to their cave to have a look. Even if he knew that the one who sent him away must be that spirit beast with eyes looking at the sky. After thinking about it for a while, Jing Xingji finally decided to go back to his cave to meditate. No matter what, improving his cultivation was the most practical thing. Turning around in midair, he was about to ride his sword back to the cave, when suddenly he stopped and turned his head again to look towards the northeast. "Spiritual light," he blurted out. He saw the cave in the northeast direction suddenly burst into a bright spiritual light, and countless spiritual chi rushed over there, converging into a little spiritual light, surrounding the entire cave. The celestial phenomenon of forming a nascent soul. When the auspicious clouds appeared and spiritual birds flew, Jing Xingji was certain. Joy appeared on his face. It seems that Imo Qingwei succeeded in forming her nascent soul. In this way, there were 3 nascent soul cultivators among them. In addition, Yang Qingji was close to forming his nascent soul, which was one step closer to their plan. But this scene only lasted for less than half an hour before it stopped. There was no sound of wind and thunder, and there was no follow-up celestial phenomenon. When the spiritual light dissipated, and everything returned to normal, Jing Xingji was confused again. What was going on? How could the celestial phenomenon of forming a nascent soul only reach this level? It should have lasted at least half a day. Did Imo Qingwei succeed in forming her nascent soul? If she didn't succeed, how could there be a celestial phenomenon? If she succeeded, how could the spiritual light dissipate so quickly? And even the most basic sound of wind and thunder didn't appear. It was said that in ancient times, when a cultivator formed his nascent soul, there would be a minor heavenly tribulation, because the nascent soul cultivator had already obtained the magical power to move mountains and seas, and entered the gate of immortality. Today, the minor heavenly tribulation no longer appeared, but the sound of wind and thunder was inevitable. This was the trace left by the minor heavenly tribulation, and it was also a symbol of the cultivator's great success in forming his nascent soul. He was full of doubts, and the flying sword under his feet turned and flew towards the northeast. Imo Tiange opened her eyes. Her whole body felt comfortable and full of power. She gently waved her sleeves, and the spiritual aura around her surged. She stepped out of the closed-door meditation room. At first glance, she saw the person she expected, just like when he formed his nascent soul. Their eyes met. After a long time, he said in a hoarse voice, "Finally." Emotienga smiled and naturally put her arms around his waist. He also reached out to hug her. After a long time, the two of them calmed down and walked out of the virtual sky world hand in hand. "What's going on? Why did it take 20 years? Qinshi asked. 20 years? Emotienga was surprised. You said I was in closed-door meditation for 20 years? Yes, if it weren't for the fact that your spiritual aura was very stable, I would have thought you had an accident. Emotienga was also puzzled. I just felt that the spiritual aura was very comfortable, and I didn't feel anything. Later, when my core broke and formed my nascent soul, it was also natural, and I didn't take the initiative to guide it. Really? Qinshi pressed her pulse and carefully felt it for a while. In the end, he said happily, "It seems to be a good thing. The spiritual aura in your whole body is very condensed. It doesn't look like you've just formed your nascent soul at all." Emotienga was relieved to hear what he said. Although she felt her nascent soul was very smooth, 20 years was indeed a bit abnormal. After all, she started to form her nascent soul as soon as she entered the closed-door meditation room. Unlike some cultivators who cultivated to a certain level before starting to form their nascent souls, the so-called closed-door meditation for dozens of years was actually only a few years. She recalled her experience of forming her nascent soul. She had smoothly passed the first mental trial. After taking the medicinal pill, she had been absorbing spiritual energy. This process wasn't something she had actively controlled, but it had happened naturally. At the last moment, when the conditions were right, her earth core shattered, and she became a nascent soul. The process of her core breaking was also very smooth, and she almost didn't feel any pain. Perhaps because her primordial spirit was strong enough, and she absorbed enough spiritual aura. She easily absorbed the power after her core broke, and formed her nascent soul. Finally, it was the real inner demon trial. It was different from the inner demon trial during core formation. During soul formation, one had to pass the first mental trial before they could enter the step of breaking their core to form their nascent soul. After forming their nascent soul, they still had to pass the real inner demon trial. The mental torture at the beginning tested the cultivator's heart towards Tao, and whether they had a firm belief in continuing to advance on the great Tao of the nascent soul realm. As long as there weren't any obvious flaws in their mental state, this trial wasn't difficult. However, the inner demon trial was much more terrifying. Any fears or expectations would appear in this trial. If they couldn't control themselves and got lost in the inner demon, all their efforts would be in vain. Fortunately, all these years, she never relaxed her mental training, so she didn't immerse herself in the inner demon for long. She easily got rid of it. After talking about herself, she began to ask about the outside world in the past 20 years. During these 20 years, Qinshi had been guarding the virtual sky world. At first, he felt strange and didn't dare to leave. Later, he found her condition stable, so he calmed down and paid attention to her condition while cultivating. After being tempered by the vermilion bird's breath, he needed to adapt to his body and spiritual aura again. The 3 Yang Real Fire on the 3 Yang Real Fire sword had transformed into the more overbearing vermilion bird's flame. Even the extreme Yang Real Fire had been fused with the vermilion bird's breath. In his dantian, the pure Yang spiritual aura and the vermilion bird's breath combined to form a new and powerful force. But because of this, he needed to refine the Yang spiritual bead again. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to control the vermilion bird bow that had been absorbed into the Yang spiritual bead. After 20 years of refining, he had regained control of the Yang spiritual bead. Presumably, it wouldn't be long before he could take out the vermilion bird bow. As for the spiritual beasts and the cave outside, there were no abnormalities. Just as Qinshi guessed, Xiaofan advanced to the 6th rank in the past 20 years. Xiaohu was also almost there. Although the bright bird didn't advance, its strength also increased greatly. Sure enough, the blood-eating vine had a miraculous effect on spiritual beasts. Feifei, who was left outside the virtual sky world, had also cultivated to the peak of the 5th rank. As for the cave, There weren't many people in this immortal palace, so there wouldn't be any accidents. At most, Jing Xingji would come to harass them. Speaking of Jing Xingji came outside. Qin Shoujing, Mo Qingwei, you should come out of your closed-door meditation now, right? He didn't send them a summoning talisman. Instead, he shouted at the entrance of the cave. Mo Tiange and Qin Shi smiled at each other, then stood up and opened the restriction on the cave. Upon seeing them, Jing Xingji immediately withdrew his flying sword and rushed inside. Did you advance to the nascent soul realm or not? He asked. He quickly scanned Mo Tiange from top to bottom. Upon discovering that she had indeed become a nascent soul cultivator, his expression became strange. Did you pass the inner demon's trial? Are there any problems? Mo Tiange didn't understand why he looked like this. Otherwise, how could I still be standing here? Fellow Taoist Jing, what are you doing? Jing Xingji rubbed his nose and said, I saw the celestial phenomenon of your nascent soul formation outside, but there was no sound of wind or thunder, and the spiritual light dispersed very quickly. I thought you advanced to the nascent soul realm, but didn't pass the inner demon's trial. He then muttered to himself, It's strange. Since you advanced to the nascent soul realm smoothly, why is the celestial phenomenon only half complete? Chapter 502. Only half of the nascent soul celestial phenomenon. Mo Tiange and Qin Shi looked at each other with confusion on their faces. Neither of them had thought about the nascent soul celestial phenomenon. Mo Tiange had the experience of forming her gold core in the virtual sky world, and Qin Shi also formed his nascent soul there. The virtual sky world was a closed space that couldn't attract the spiritual aura of heaven and earth, so it was impossible for celestial phenomena to occur inside. As for the outside world, the immortal palace was torn open, so it was also a closed space. They also didn't expect celestial phenomena to occur. What happened? Qin Shi asked. Jing Xingji said, You don't know? Just now, there was a spiritual light around your cave, so I knew you should have come out. But the sound of wind and thunder didn't appear, and the spiritual light dispersed. The whole process took less than an hour. It was indeed only an hour, since they came out of the virtual sky world. Seeing that the two of them were deep in thought, Jing Xingji couldn't help but ask, What's going on? Tell me. Qin Shi asked, Tell me, why did the nascent soul celestial phenomenon appear? Of course it's because of advancing to the nascent soul realm, and using one's own strength to trigger the spiritual aura of heaven and earth. Jing Xingji answered halfway and paused, seeming to have understood something. You also realized it, right? Spiritual aura of heaven and earth. How much spiritual aura can there be in a closed space? How could it trigger the nascent soul celestial phenomenon? Jing Xingji was silent, thinking about what Mo Tiange said. It was common knowledge in the cultivation world that celestial phenomena would occur when a cultivator advanced to the gold core realm. It was also known why celestial phenomena were born. When a cultivator advanced to the gold core realm, heaven and earth sensed the cultivator's powerful strength, triggering the fluctuation of spiritual aura, and thus celestial phenomena. For cultivators, the so-called spiritual aura of heaven and earth was the spiritual aura existing between heaven and earth. This kind of spiritual aura was different from the spiritual aura produced by spirit veins. It was the original primordial energy existing between heaven and earth. Therefore, even in places without spirit veins, cultivators could still cultivate. This was a problem for an enclosed space. Without spirit veins, there wouldn't be too much spiritual aura. In other words, the spiritual aura of heaven and earth was too little to trigger celestial phenomena. I see. Jing Xingji understood. The spiritual aura of heaven and earth in this immortal palace wasn't enough to trigger the nascent soul celestial phenomenon, so the spiritual light dispersed so quickly? Not only that, Qin Shi said, what I also want to say is, how big is the entire immortal palace? Excluding the spiritual aura produced by the spirit veins, and these high-grade spirit stones, how much spiritual aura can there be? Even a half-completed celestial phenomenon Ascendant wouldn't be able to withstand it, right? Jing Xingji reacted quickly and immediately said, You're saying that this immortal palace isn't sealed? Or should I say, it's not fully enclosed? Qingxi nodded. You're right. If half of the celestial phenomenon really appeared, it means there's a lot of spiritual aura there. At the very least, it should include the spiritual aura on the spiritual mountain outside. The meaning of these words, Jing Xingji was all too clear. If the barrier between the mystical palace and the mystical mountain was cracked to begin with, it would be much easier for them to destroy the barrier. The entrance that connected Spirited Mountain to the outside world was created by the 5 saints using the space-tearing technique from the Immortal Palace. It was very stable and could be used to exit directly. If I can find the crack in the restriction between the Immortal Palace and the Spirited Mountain. Mo Tiange looked at the delighted Jing Xingji and said, Fellow Taoist Jing, don't be too happy too early. The restrictions in this Immortal Palace are far beyond our realm. Besides, the Immortal Palace is so big. How could it be easy to find the crack? Jing Xingji waved his hand indifferently and said, You're right, but there's more hope than before, isn't there? That's a good thing. Alright, you're right. If they could really find the crack in the space, the Xuanxu cloud connecting formation would have a higher chance of success. The 3 of them talked for a while more before Jing Xingji took his leave. The restrictions in the Immortal Palace were so brilliant that finding the crack wasn't something that could be done overnight. Soon after, Mo Tiange and Jing Xingji went back to the underground palace to see Yang Qingji. Yang Qingji was very happy to see her successfully advancing to the nascent soul realm. The 4 of them were now grasshoppers on a rope. Mo Tiange successfully advanced to the nascent soul realm, which meant she was one step closer to their goal. However, this also urged him to seize the time. Only 3 nascent soul cultivators weren't enough. Using the Xuanxu cloud connecting formation required 5 mediums. Him advancing to the nascent soul realm was just one more. So he had to think of another way. After leaving the underground palace, the 2 of them were about to return to their immortal's cave when Feifei, who had been crouching on Mo Tiange's shoulder, said, Wait, I'll take you to a place. Huh, what place? Could there be a good place in this immortal palace that Feifei took a fancy to? Just follow me, Feifei said, jumped down from Mo Tiange's shoulder, turned around and ran. The 2 of them glanced at each other then followed. Feifei was very sensitive to the aura of spiritual treasures, so it must have found some kind of treasure. After Yang Qingji practiced the primordial devil art, the aura of the primordial devil in the Immortal Palace basically disappeared, and the deification refined corpses were trapped in the valley. Now there were only some refined corpses and demonic beasts with low cultivation levels in this Immortal Palace, so the danger was greatly reduced. Although Feifei was a spiritual beast and didn't have any offensive spells, it was very brave. Presumably, in the past 20 years, it had searched every corner of the Immortal Palace. 2 people and 1 beast went further and further away from the buildings of the Immortal Palace, deep into the back mountain. This Immortal Palace occupied a very vast area, even including part of the mountain range. Back then, Fu Yaozi said that the depths of the back mountain was the real interior of the Immortal Palace. From what he saw, it might be the location of the Immortal's Cave of the Cultivator with the highest cultivation level in this ice palace. However, he and the other 4 people couldn't enter because of time constraints and their low cultivation levels. When she entered the Immortal Palace that year, Mo Tiange didn't think about entering the back mountain. They also didn't have much time, and their divine abilities and wisdom were inferior to the 5 saints, so it would be a waste of time to come. Later, when she was trapped in the Immortal Palace, leaving the Immortal Palace became her biggest goal, so she naturally didn't think about it. Since even Fu Yaozi didn't recommend her to come and explore, it meant that the possibility of her entering was almost zero. So why should she waste time? Besides, she had already obtained great benefits from the Immortal Palace, so being too greedy wasn't a good thing. She followed Feifei until they reached a dense forest. She saw Feifei darting in and out of the forest, seemingly following some kind of pattern. The more Mo Tiange followed, the more baffled she became. In the end, she suddenly remembered something. Is this a formation? Feifei stopped and turned to look at her. Your reaction isn't slow at all. Ignoring its tone, Mo Tiange asked, What's going on? This formation is very clever. I can't see any clues at all. How did you know how to break it? This isn't the way to break it, Fei Fei said. This is the 9 Palaces 8 trigrams formation that was widely spread in the distant past era. This formation doesn't have any lethality, and it's mainly used to prevent others from entering. As long as you understand the footwork, you can enter. This formation is a simplified version of the 9 Palaces 8 trigrams formation. Presumably, many of its mysteries have been lost since the distant past era. I see. She felt strange. Fei Fei had no interest in formations, so how could it suddenly understand ancient formations? Then, do you know how to break it? Fei Fei glanced at her. I know how to walk. I don't know how to set it up. As they spoke, their vision suddenly brightened. They were already out of the dense forest. This is... Upon seeing the scene in front of them, both Emotienga and Qin were dumbfounded. In front of them was a small valley with luxuriant grass, strange rocks, waterfalls, and clear blue pond water. In terms of scenery, this small valley could be regarded as quiet and elegant. It was an excellent place to stay. However, no matter how beautiful the scenery was, it was nothing in the cultivation world. Their cultivation group's encampment was a celestial mountain, and there were many places with beautiful scenery. However, there was an extremely clever blocking formation outside this small valley, and Fei Fei was so cautious. Could it be that there was something special about this place? With this thought in mind, the two of them glanced at the scenery in front of them one by one. After looking for a long time, they didn't find anything unusual. The spiritual aura was quite dense, but it was only a little bit denser than the immortal palace outside. It was nothing compared to the virtual sky world. There were also some spiritual plants, but they weren't any special species. Moreover, there didn't seem to be any mineral deposits. After looking for a long time, Emotienga was still very confused, so she asked directly, Fei Fei, why did you bring us here? Are there any treasures here? Fei Fei was squatting by the pond to wash its claws. After it finished washing, it began to comb its golden fur. The treasures are right in front of us, it said lazily. Right in front of us. Qin Shi's eyes moved. He suddenly approached the pond and squatted down. Could it be this water? Fei Fei rolled on a big rock by the pond. You have a good eye. It was obviously a compliment, but when it came out of its mouth, it felt awkward. However, the two of them were used to it, so they both ignored its tone. Emotienga walked closer, scooped up a handful of water, and looked at it carefully for a while. She felt it was no different from ordinary spiritual water, and the spiritual aura inside was very weak, not even comparable to the famous spiritual springs in the celestial pole. As for what was special, it seemed to be very clean, so clean that there were almost no impurities, which was very rare in spiritual springs. This is spirit-tempering water. Fei Fei didn't let them be confused for too long. It's the cleanest water in the world. It can wash away all impurities. Emotienga was a little surprised. She once wanted to get rid of the remaining devil aura on the Fuxing sword, but she couldn't find a suitable method. Fei Fei told her there used to be a kind of treasure in this world called spirit-tempering water, which was the nemesis of devil aura. Unfortunately, this thing had long disappeared from the world, and she couldn't find any clues to find it. Later, Fu Yaozi woke up. He wasn't afraid of the devil aura on the Fuxing sword at all, so Emotienga didn't worry about it anymore. She didn't expect to see spirit-tempering water here. Whether it's concocting pills or refining tools, adding spirit-tempering water can greatly improve the success rate. If you can refine it into a magic weapon, it'll be even better. This thing is the nemesis of devil aura, so it'll be very easy to deal with devil cultivators. Emotienga finally understood. No wonder there was a strange formation outside this valley. It turned out there was such a treasure inside. During the war between the righteous and the devil, this spirit-tempering water showed its effect. Without hesitation, she took out the Fuxing sword from her Qianquan ring and dipped the sword into the pond. With a chi sound, the Fuxing sword emitted a light smoke, and the devil aura attached to the sword dissipated at a speed visible to the naked eye. Chapter 503. Without the devil aura, the Fuxing sword was still simple and heavy. Its aura was heavy, but the body of the sword was cold. The power of wind and thunder inside was even more intense, almost breaking out of the sword. Qingxi was surprised. This sword has the thunder attribute? The previous Fuxing sword had momentum, but it was hidden. Only after the devil aura was removed did he realize the sword was made of good thunder attribute materials. Treasures of the thunder attribute were not common in the world of cultivators. Firstly, there were very few people with thunder spiritual roots, so it was more suitable for people with gold spiritual roots to practice gold cultivation techniques. Secondly, treasures of the thunder attribute were very powerful. However, because of this their progress was very slow, so very few people chose them. Mo Tiange didn't expect the Fuxing sword to be a rare thunder attribute magic weapon. Mo Tiange knew about it, but she didn't care because she couldn't remove the devil aura before. After she advanced to the nascent soul realm, she had to refine many magic weapons again to display the strength of a nascent soul cultivator. Now that she removed the devil aura from the Fuxing sword, she obtained a powerful magic weapon. She said happily, Master Fu Yao said this sword isn't his natal magic weapon, but he spent a lot of effort to collect materials to make it. There are pure thunder crystals inside, and if it's used with thunder attribute spells, it'll be very powerful. Oh, in that case, it complements the Great Heavenly Thunder technique. They happened to take a Great Heavenly Thunder technique from the storeroom. The reason why he chose this cultivation technique was because he took into consideration Mo Tiange's lack of Thunderbolt Strike, which could make up for her lack of attack power. The Fuxing sword was also of the lightning attribute, so it just so happened to be of the lightning attribute. Yes, looking at the new Fuxing sword, Mo Tiange couldn't bear to put it down. After playing with it for a while, she put it away and asked Feifei, Feifei, why is there so much spirit tempering water? Besides, this pool doesn't seem to be stagnant. Is it inexhaustible? Feifei said, spirit tempering water needs a lot to be effective. Whether it's concocting pills or refining tools, you need to add a whole bottle, unlike some spiritual waters that only need 1 or 2 drops. As for how this water is produced, just like spirit veins have spiritual eyes, spirit tempering water also has a source. Hearing this, Mo Tiange and Qingxi looked at each other and asked, what about the source? The source of the spirit tempering water is usually in the shape of jade or stone. It is called the spirit tempering jade or spirit tempering stone. No one knows how they are produced. Bury it somewhere, and the spirit quenching water will be produced slowly. Fei leaped onto her shoulder. Hurry up and let Xiaofan out. Let it look for it. It was so easy to order others around. Nevertheless, Mo Tiange still listened to it. She entered the virtual sky world and took Xiaofan out, letting it go into the water to look for spirit tempering jades or spirit tempering stones. Lil Fan was a sea beast, and it was very agile underwater. Let it find the most suitable one. Not long after they entered the water, Xiaofan floated up from the bottom of the pond with a glowing jade in its mouth. Xiaofan handed it to Mo Tiange and asked, Master, is this it? Mo Tiange took the jade stone. It was about the size of a palm, and there were faint veined patterns on its surface. If she hadn't known about it beforehand, she wouldn't have been able to tell it was a treasure that could produce spirit tempering water. That's it. Feifei urged. Put it in the virtual sky world. The 2 people and 2 beasts entered the virtual sky world. Mo Tiange asked the puppets to dig a pond by the stream, and buried the spirit tempering jade in it. After thinking for a while, she went out to take some spirit tempering water from the pond, and put it in her Qianquan ring. Even if they had spirit tempering jade, it would take some time to produce spirit tempering water, so they took some as a backup first. After doing all this, Feifei led the way. The 2 of them left the 9 palaces 8 trigrams formation, and went back to the cave. They had spent more than 20 years in this immortal palace, so they couldn't delay the matter of getting out. It wasn't just the 2 of them who thought so. Jing Xingji also thought so. He had a big grudge, so how could he be willing to be trapped in this immortal palace for the rest of his life? Mo Tiange also had things to do in the outside world. Now that time was tight, they couldn't delay it any longer. Fellow Taoist Qingwei, how long will it take to comprehend your Xuanshu cloud connecting formation? Jing Xingji asked. Emotinga pondered for a while. This is hard to say. In my estimation, 1 or 2 years is the shortest, but maybe 3 or 5 years. After all, the Xuanxu cloud connecting formation involved a very complicated space-tearing technique, so it definitely wouldn't take a few years to completely master it. However, they didn't need to pay too much attention to using this formation to open a passage. They just needed to figure out how to use it. 3 or 5 years. Alright, let's count as long as it takes. Jing Xingji thought for a while. To activate the Xuanxu cloud connecting formation, we need 5 nascent soul cultivators, or above as mediators, right? Correct. Perhaps we can improve other aspects, but this is the principle of this formation. In fact, it didn't matter what cultivation level the mediators were, but to activate this formation, it needed too much spiritual aura. 5 nascent soul cultivators, or above would barely be enough, Jing Xingji said. Then here comes the problem. Right now, there are only 4 living people in this immortal palace. The 3 of us are already in the nascent soul realm, and that devil cultivator boy will soon enter closed-door meditation to form his nascent soul. He cultivates a top-notch devil technique, so he seems very confident in forming his nascent soul. Let's assume he can successfully form his nascent soul in 3 or 5 years. But that's only 4 nascent soul cultivators. There's still 1 left. What should we do? There are 2 ways, Qinshi said thoughtfully. The first is to find a nascent soul substitute. The second is to find a crack in the restriction between the immortal palace and the spiritual mountain. Maybe the 4 of us can break the restriction. Emotinga agreed. Emotinga expressed her approval. Both methods are feasible. The first method was needless to say. It was the safest solution. As for the second method, they only needed to put a puppet in the position of the 5th medium. Breaking the restriction would be done by the 4 of them, but it depended on how big the crack in the restriction was. If it was too small, it would be in vain. Then let's talk about it one by one. The first is to find a nascent soul substitute. In this immortal palace, there are things related to the cultivation realm. Aside from us, there are only spiritual beasts and puppets. Speaking of spiritual beasts, I know your bird is already in the 7th rank, but it won't be easy for it to advance to the 8th rank, right? Qinshi smiled bitterly. It's not easy for spiritual beasts to advance to the 8th rank. It won't take long even if it takes 100 years to advance from the 7th rank to the 8th rank. It'll take at least 30 to 50 years for my bright bird to advance. 30 to 50 years? Can you wait that long? I can't wait that long. Emotinga shook her head decisively. I have something to do outside. If I wait 30 to 50 years, I don't know if I can finish it. Time is tight. I can only wait 20 years at most. We must go out within 20 years. Jing Xingji didn't ask much about the specifics. He said, since spiritual beasts won't work, we can only consider puppets. Fellow Taoist Qingwei, can you make nascent soul puppets now? Emotinga shook her head. I can't now, but it's not impossible. She still had the jade bone puppet technique in her hands, and she also had the main materials. However, this technique was very difficult, and she still lacked other materials, so she couldn't guarantee she could make it. In other words, this method can only be used as a backup. Emotinga nodded to show her agreement. Jing Xingji sighed. Then let's consider the second method. We'll look for the crack in the restriction between the immortal palace and the spiritual mountain. How confident are you? Emotinga and Qinshi glanced at each other. Their expressions were a bit solemn. After thinking for a while, Qinshi said, the immortal palace is so big. It won't be easy to find a crack in the restriction that might be very small. Not to mention the restriction is so brilliant that we might not be able to find it with our eyesight. Even if we can find it, I'm afraid it'll take a lot of time. I think so too. Jing Xingji was a bit dejected. Sometimes when I think about it, I feel a bit regretful. Why don't I have any interest in miscellaneous knowledge? If I knew 1 or 2 things, I wouldn't be so helpless. Judging from his appearance, he must have thought a lot these days. With his personality, it was already good that he could endure being trapped in the immortal palace for more than 20 years. Let's do it this way, Qinshi said while thinking. Neither of these two methods is foolproof, but they both have hope. We'd better do it separately. We have to look for the crack in the Immortal Palace's restriction. Tienga, you should also study it, and see if you can make nascent soul puppets. These two methods didn't conflict, so there wouldn't be any problem if they were carried out at the same time. Alright, if we want to get out, there are a few things we have to do. The first is to study the mysterious void cloud connecting formation. The second is to make nascent soul puppets. The third is to find the crack in the Immortal Palace's restriction. If we choose one of the two, we'll have hope of getting out. There's one more thing. Fellow Taoist Yang has to advance to the nascent soul realm smoothly, Jing Xingji added. Otherwise, even if we manage to do it, we still won't be able to get out. Mo Tienga said. Primordial devil art isn't an ordinary devil art. Yang Qingji also absorbed a lot of primordial devil aura, so I think it's very likely that he'll succeed in forming his nascent soul. Alright. Jing Xingji no longer doubted her. In any case, we can't interfere with soul formation, so we'll trust him for the time being. It'll take at least 3 to 5 years for fellow Taoist Yang to form his nascent soul. During this time, we can't just sit around and do nothing. Qin brought the topic back. As I said just now, there are 3 things we have to do. The first 2 can only be left to Tienga, but the third, fellow Taoist Jing, this is our problem. It's not a problem for me to help, Jing Xingji said. The problem is that I'm not proficient in restrictions. I'm afraid I won't be able to find it even if I find it. This isn't a difficult problem, Mo Tienga interrupted. I have a magic weapon here called the sensing bell. It's very sensitive to fluctuations and restrictions. Senior Marshal brother, you can refine another one. The 2 of you can take one with you. Concocting pills and refining tools were Qin Shi's strengths. Since he had the refining method, he could refine it as long as he didn't lack materials. Thus the 3 of them reached an agreement. Among the 4 people in Immortal Palace, Yang Qingji only needed to focus on his closed-door meditation to form his nascent soul. If he successfully advanced to the nascent soul realm, it wouldn't be too late for him to join them. Mo Tienga's first task was to study the mysterious cloud connecting formation. In her spare time, she would see if she could refine nascent soul puppets. Qin Shi first refined the sensing bell. Then he and Jing Xingji went to look for cracks in the restrictions around Immortal Palace. With this kind of division of labor, in 3 to 5 years, they would have some progress in leaving Immortal Palace. Having come to a conclusion, Jing Xingji left with satisfaction. Next, they had to take action to leave Immortal Palace. As she watched Jing Xingji's departing figure, Mo Tienga suddenly said, Say, what if the cracks in the restrictions are near the refined corpses? Qin Shi was dumbfounded. He didn't know how to answer. Chapter 504. Mo Tienga stood in midair, looking down at the Immortal Palace shrouded in immortal aura. In this independent space, there was no sunrise or sunset. There was only misty white light. Although it was filled with immortal aura, and was as beautiful as a fairyland, it was like a dream, unreal and unreal. In the blink of an eye, she had been here for almost 30 years. She couldn't remember the feeling of sunlight anymore. Sometimes she vaguely felt that the mountain breeze, the sea waves, the blue sky, and the bright sunshine were all dreams. If she went on like this, she almost suspected that she would forget the outside world. However, these days were coming to an end soon. She smiled faintly and turned her head. She saw a red light rising from the lonely peak below and approaching her. In the blink of an eye, the red light was already in front of her. What's wrong? Qin Shi asked her. Mo Tienga shook her head. Nothing. Let's go. Seeing that she didn't look worried, Qin Shi didn't ask any more questions. The 2 of them turned around and flew side by side towards the underground palace. Their speed wasn't fast. Although they had explored every possible place these years, there were still drifting restrictions in this immortal palace. It wouldn't be good if they ran into them. When they arrived at the entrance of the underground palace, they walked along the tunnel until they stopped in front of a cave filled with devil aura. Yang Qingji and Jing Xingji were already inside the cave. The devil aura on Yang Qingji's body was faint, but the spiritual aura pressure was extremely heavy. He had successfully advanced to the nascent soul realm. You're finally here. Jing Xingji was in high spirits. I thought you were having fun here and didn't want to leave. She glanced at him faintly and said, Unlike you, I didn't have the chance to have fun even if I wanted to. Seeing that Jing Xingji's face turned green, Mo Tiange said in time, Fellow Taoists, are you ready? Being dragged back to the main topic, Jing Xingji and Yang Qingji both answered, Of course. Mo Tiange looked at Qin Shi. Qin Shi said, Let's set the formation. She nodded, took out magic weapons, formation flags, spirit stones, and other things from her Qianquan ring, and began to set the formation in the cave. It had been 5 years since she successfully advanced to the nascent soul realm. During these 5 years, everything went smoothly. Yang Qingji went into seclusion to form his nascent soul. When he came out of seclusion on the 3rd year, he successfully advanced to the nascent soul realm and joined their ranks. Her study of the Xuanshu cloud-linking formation was unexpectedly smooth. Perhaps it was because she had advanced to the nascent soul realm. Many things that she couldn't understand before were easily solved. By the time Yang Qingji came out of his closed-door meditation, he had already understood the formation. Qin Shi, Jing Xingji, and later, Yang Qingji. The 3 of them worked together and spent several years before they finally found the crack in the restriction between the Immortal Palace and the Spiritual Mountain. The result was unexpected. The crack was actually where the primordial devil steel was, which was also the cave where Yang Qingji previously performed closed-door meditation. In hindsight, it was only natural. The leakage of primordial devil qi was not only in the Immortal Palace, but also in the Spirited Mountain. There must be a crack in the restriction between the underground palace and the outside world. The only thing that wasn't going well was the jade bone puppet technique. Except for the introductory mechanism book she found in the Qianquan ring of the deification ancient cultivator, Mo Tiange didn't have any other books related to mechanisms, so she could only explore it by herself. However, since the jade bone puppet technique was a treasure in the storehouse, how could it be so easy to figure out? As for the missing materials, she mobilized her 3 spiritual beasts and Qin Shi's bright bird to search everywhere in the Immortal Palace before she finally managed to gather them. After countless experiments, she finally made some headway, but the so-called deification realm couldn't be reached. For this reason, they spent a lot of effort to enter the scripture depository and obtain some ancient books before they finally succeeded in making this jade bone puppet. However, this puppet couldn't reach the deification realm. It was only in the nascent soul realm. This was something they couldn't do anything about. No matter how talented he was, he couldn't reach the great master realm in just a few years. Moreover, according to the ancient books they found, mechanisms couldn't be used casually. If the cultivator didn't have enough cultivation level, some refining methods couldn't be used, so it was almost impossible for a nascent soul cultivator to make a puppet in the deification realm. After finding this point, Mo Tiange felt relieved. For now, if they wanted to go out, the nascent soul puppet was enough. As for the deification puppet, it wouldn't be too late to refine it again when her cultivation level and attainments in the art of mechanisms were high enough. Yang Qingji had already put away the primal devil stone tablet. Mo Tiange used spirit stone powder to draw the embryonic form of the entire cloudlink formation in the cave. She then ordered the 3 of them to lay the formation together. The cloudlink formation this time was much more complicated than the one they came in with. First of all, they didn't have a holy object with the power of the 5 saints sealed inside, so they needed a lot of spiritual aura. Second, Mo Tiange made some changes to the cloudlink formation, so the passage she created should be much safer than when they came in. However, this also increased the complexity of the formation. As the formation flags fell one after another, a complete star atlas gradually appeared on the ground. Finally, she inserted the high-grade spirit stones one by one. The formation suddenly shone with a white light, and the entire star atlas seemed to have come alive. It was like a real starry sky with twinkling stars and vibrant colors. Compared to the one they came in with before, this one was many times more exquisite. Emotinga straightened up and heaved a sigh of relief. The cloud-link formation was finally laid. "Everyone stand in your positions," she said. Without needing any instructions, the other three people each stood in a corner of the star atlas. Emotinga placed the jade bone puppet in the last position. This puppet was made from the crystal skeleton of a deification cultivator, who cultivated the ice heart jade bone technique, the nephrite Holy Spirit jade as its skin, and many other rare materials that only appeared in legends. The puppet was lifelike and extremely agile. Emotinga even dressed it in Han Ice Palace's uniform. At first glance, it looked no different from a living person. The four of them had long understood the incantation to activate the cloud-link formation. At this moment, all of their expressions were solemn. They had been trapped in the immortal palace for 30 years. Whether they could leave or not depended on this time. The four of them, together with the jade bone puppet, began to chant the incantation. The 5 corners under their feet shone brighter and brighter, and the spiritual aura produced by the high-grade spirit stones crazily rushed to where they stood. "Open!" Emotinga shouted. Without hesitation, everyone poured their spiritual aura into the star atlas under their feet. This process lasted for a long time. The star atlas was like an insatiable tautai, swallowing their spiritual aura in big gulps. The jade bone puppet couldn't hold on anymore. Emotinga pressed her Qingquan ring, and several crystal jades appeared in her hand. She quickly stuffed them into the puppet's hand. She and Yang Qingji had just advanced to the nascent soul realm, so they didn't have enough spiritual aura. But they were prepared, so they swallowed medicinal pills and used crystal jades to replenish their spiritual aura. Jing Xingji was next. Although he advanced to the nascent soul realm a long time ago, he was a sword cultivator, and this wasn't his specialty. Qin Shi was the only one who wasn't affected. He had refined the Yang spiritual bead all these years. The Yang spiritual bead had endless spiritual aura, so it would automatically replenish his spiritual aura whenever he lacked spiritual aura. Just when Emotinga and Yang Qingji almost couldn't hold on any longer, with a buzzing sound, a ray of white light covered the entire star chart. This mysterious cloud-connecting formation, which had absorbed enough spiritual aura, emitted a sparkling light. Then a dark hole appeared in the center of the star atlas. Success! Upon seeing this hole, Emotinga's body went limp, and she almost fell to the ground. The spiritual aura in her body had been sucked dry. If she hadn't obtained a lot of crystal jades in the immortal palace, and had the support of high-quality panaceas, the spiritual aura in her body wouldn't have been enough to activate this formation, even if she advanced to the nascent soul realm. Yang Qingji and Jing Xingji weren't much better. Even the jade bone puppet lost its luster. Looking at this dark hole, the four of them looked at each other and couldn't help but smile. 30 years. Almost 30 years. They finally found the way out. The hard work of these 30 years wasn't in vain. Quickly meditate to restore your spiritual aura. Qin Shi reminded them first. We can't say for sure how long this passage can last. Upon hearing this, the other people's expressions became serious. Without delay, they sat down cross-legged to adjust their breaths. If it was before, this kind of situation would absolutely not happen. Not to mention Jing Xingji, Yang Qingji was very vigilant. How could he adjust his breath without any precaution under other people's eyes? But this time, they were trapped in the immortal palace together, and only found the way out after 30 years. They all felt sympathy for each other after going through trials and tribulations together, and they also trusted each other a little more. Holding the crystal jades, Emotinga operated the origin in her dantian with all her strength, and quickly recovered her spiritual aura. Then, she replaced the crystal jades that had exhausted their spiritual aura in the jade bone puppet. She put the old ones into her bag, and inserted the new ones into the puppet. The puppet immediately regained its momentum. This was the advantage of the puppet. If its spiritual aura was exhausted, it could immediately return to its peak state after replacing the crystal jades. These crystal jades could automatically restore spiritual aura, and were inexhaustible. Before long, Jing Xingji and Yang Qingji also recovered their spiritual aura and stood up. Who's going first? Jing Xingji looked at Yang Qingji, then at them. Yang Qingji was about to take a step forward, But Emotienga said, "Let the puppet go first." The three of them thought this was a good idea. The puppet could be repaired if it was broken, and it could explore the way in front. Qinshi said, "Okay, you drive the puppet first. I'll go with you." Emotienga nodded. She took one last look at the cave, and didn't waste any more time. She drove the puppet into the cave, then went inside side by side with Jing Xingji. After they went inside, Jing Xingji glanced at Yang Qingji and said, "Fellow Taoist Yang, please go first." His attitude towards Yang Qingji couldn't be said to be contemptuous or warm, but it definitely wasn't as casual as when he faced Yang Qingji and Emotienga. Yang Qingji smiled and didn't say anything. He took a step forward and entered the passage. How could he not know what Jing Xingji was thinking? In the end, he was a devil cultivator and came from Yunzhong, so he wasn't on the same path as them. Although they didn't reject him, they also couldn't trust him wholeheartedly. However, after experiencing his master's possession and being trapped in the immortal palace for dozens of years, his mentality was much more mature than before, so he didn't care. Jing Xingji waited until Yang Qingji's figure disappeared before he went inside. The figures of the four people disappeared from the cave, and the underground palace returned to silence. After a while, the cave suddenly shook, and the spiritual aura scattered little by little. In the end, the Vermilion Bird Sacrificial Temple, which had its primordial devil aura sucked dry, and the Vermilion Bird Bow taken away, suddenly shook and gradually intensified until it finally collapsed into a pile of ruins. This fluctuation was slowly transmitted to the Immortal Palace. The whole Immortal Palace began to shake, and the high-grade spirit stones used to build the Immortal Palace collapsed piece by piece. The lofty Immortal Palace gradually changed beyond recognition. The mountains collapsed and the earth cracked, the sky darkened, and the spiritual aura became chaotic. In the end, it collapsed with a loud bang. The four people who entered the passage were completely unaware of all this. Chapter 505. As soon as they came out of the passage, a blazing aura hit them head-on. Emotienga was startled. "It's actually here." The exit of the passage, opened by the Xuanshu Cloud Passage Formation, was in the True Fire Canyon, halfway up the mountain that they had passed before. This canyon was deep on the inside and narrow on the outside. There was only a narrow sliver of sky above their heads, and they couldn't see any daylight. The extreme young real fire was burning inside the canyon, which was also the highest grade earthly pole real fire. When they came here, there was indeed a lot of primordial devil aura nearby. It turned out that it was because of the crack between this place and the underground palace. Qinshi swept his gaze over the scene in front of him. With a wave of his sleeve, a thin red mist-shaped protective shield appeared around the two of them. The extreme young real fire seemed to be afraid of this shield and avoided it. He had been practicing fire attribute cultivation techniques since he was a child, so his real fire was now refined into the Vermilion Bird Flame. The Vermilion Bird was the essence of Li Fire. Its natal real fire was the highest grade real fire in the world, and it also had intelligence. Even the highest grade of the three great external fires couldn't compare to it. After a while, Yang Qingji appeared at the exit of the passage. Seeing the scene outside, he frowned slightly and made a hand seal. Primordial devil aura was released and wrapped around his body. Although this primordial devil aura didn't have the effect of restraining real fire, it was still powerful. With the protection of primordial devil aura, the real fire couldn't do anything to him. The last one to come out was Jing Xingji, who followed Yang Qingji closely. "So troublesome," he muttered when he saw the extreme young real fire around him. He waved his sleeves and unsheathed his flying sword, which instantly turned into a fierce sword intent that enveloped his body. "Let's go." Jing Xingji felt relaxed after coming out of the immortal palace that had trapped him for 30 years. He took a deep breath and couldn't restrain the joy on his face. "We're finally out. I was so stifled." He stamped his feet, and a tangible flying sword lifted him up. He was the first one to fly out of the canyon. The extreme young real fire collided with the sword intent released from his body and avoided it. It seemed like a sword cultivator only had one sword, but in fact, once a cultivator reached the core formation realm, It wouldn't be a problem for him to create as many swords as he wanted. When he moved, Yang Qingji followed closely behind. After that, Qin Shi and Emotienga also flew out of the valley. Under Emotienga's control, the jade-bone puppet followed closely behind them. This jade-bone puppet was made of a special material. The nephrite holy spiritual jade it was made of was extremely flexible and tough. When it was made, Qin Shi used his vermilion bird's flames to successfully smelt it, so Supreme Young Real Fire alone couldn't harm it. It was also wearing the uniform of the Frost Palace. It was unknown what this uniform was made of, but it could be called a top-grade defensive artifact. It was not afraid of the extreme young True Fire at all. The four of them, and the puppet exited the True Fire Canyon in no time. At this time, Qin Shi suddenly sensed something. He turned around to look and was shocked. Immortal Palace. The other three turned their heads and followed his line of sight. Immediately, everyone was stunned. The Immortal Palace that had trapped them for 30 years, the heavily enchanted Immortal Palace, slowly collapsed into a pile of rubble in front of them. The collapse of the Immortal Palace caused a strong fluctuation of spiritual qi. The surrounding snowy ground stirred up a snowy mist, blurring the appearance of the Immortal Palace. How could this be? Emotienga mumbled to herself. All these years, in order to get out of the Immortal Palace, she had learned the power of the Immortal Palace's restrictions like the back of her hand. How could it collapse just like that? What kind of power could make the Immortal Palace collapse in an instant? Why didn't it collapse earlier or later? But it collapsed right when they came out. Don't think too much, Qin Shi said with a serious expression. The Immortal Palace is destroyed, and the restrictions collapse. It will definitely affect the whole space. Let's go. With his reminder, the others seemed to wake up from a dream. Without any hesitation, they turned into rays of light and flew toward the foot of the Spirit Mountain. At the same time, several rays of light also appeared in several hidden corners of the Spirit Mountain, and also flew toward the foot of the mountain. There were actually other cultivators in this Spirit Mountain. This thought flashed in Emotienga's mind. Then she thought about it and understood what was going on. The passage to the Immortal Palace could only last for 3 days, but the passage to this space was different. It only took 1 hour to enter, but one could leave at any time. Some nascent soul cultivators were stuck in a bottleneck all year round. They felt that this place was full of spiritual qi and rich resources, so they might enter closed-door meditation here. However, they were really bold. At that time, many nascent soul cultivators came in, and this place wasn't their territory. It wasn't easy for them to find a safe place to cultivate. Not to mention there were also high-level demonic beasts here. The demonic beasts in this space had extremely strong vitality. When the space was torn open, they didn't die out. The environment here was very suitable for cultivation, and there were no natural enemies like humans. After so many years, it wasn't like there weren't any demonic beasts that advanced to the 9th or 10th rank. If they reached the 10th rank, they would be equivalent to late-stage nascent soul cultivators. As soon as those rays of light appeared, the other 3 people also noticed them. Yang Qingji whispered, "It's been so many years. What kind of people are still here?" Jing Xingji, however, noticed the abnormality. His expression was a bit strange. Besides humans, there are also demonic beasts. Hearing this, the others were all stunned. Emotienga spread her divine sense and looked as far as her eyes could see. Sure enough, she could faintly sense spiritual aura fluctuations different from those of human cultivators among the rays of light. Demonic beasts above the 8th rank already had spiritual intelligence. Presumably, after discovering the abnormality in this space, these demonic beasts were also running for their lives. This time, the situation was complicated. Human cultivators and demonic beasts were natural enemies. As soon as they saw each other, they wouldn't even need to greet each other. They would definitely try their best to kill each other. Besides, there was only one exit in this space. Even so, the 4 people and 1 puppet still flew with all their might. At the same time, the other rays of light also didn't slow down and rushed madly towards the exit. The first ones they ran into were 2 demonic beasts in the 8th rank and the 9th rank respectively. These 2 demonic beasts had taken human form and had human appearances, but their bodies still retained some demonic beast characteristics. At first glance, it was obvious they were demonic beasts that had taken human form, and not humans. This was the first time Emotienga saw a demonic beast that had taken human form. Before, she occasionally saw demonic beasts above the 8th rank, but they always appeared in their original forms because their fighting strength was the strongest in their original forms. The two demonic beasts that had taken human form, one green and the other white. As soon as they came face to face, the green one opened its mouth and swept its slender, long tongue towards them. Jing Xingji bore the brunt of the attack. His expression turned cold, and his sword intent suddenly soared. Hundreds of sword lights appeared around his body and slashed towards the green demonic beast's long tongue. Sensing the sharpness of the sword aura, the green demonic beast hastily retreated. The white demonic beast stepped forward and spread its arms. Lightning flashed in its palms, and a huge pillar of lightning appeared between its hands, striking towards everyone. It was a rarely seen thunder attribute demonic beast. Qin wrinkled his brows. The three young real fire swords suddenly appeared and turned into a red ocean, meeting the attack head-on. When the vermilion bird's flames and the lightning met, sizzling sounds rang out incessantly. At first, the white demonic beast still had a sneer on its face, but after a while, its expression changed greatly. The vermilion bird's flames slowly swallowed its lightning. "Wait!" A strange voice rang in their ears. The white demonic beast said, "Who are you? Why do you have the vermilion bird's breath on your bodies?" Although it spoke the human language, its intonation was extremely strange. In the distant past era, what human cultivators called demonic beasts were also spiritual beasts, but their bloodlines weren't as noble as real spirits. The vermilion bird belonged to the 5 spirits, and was one of the noblest divine beasts. Any beast that cultivated couldn't ignore it. Qin didn't stop, but he also didn't press forward. He said, "What does this have to do with you? Since you've already taken human form, you're no less intelligent than humans. You attacked me as soon as you saw me. What else is there to say?" The two human-shaped demonic beasts looked at each other. The white one turned to look at the collapsed immortal palace and said, "Since you have the vermilion bird's breath on your body, you can also be considered related to us beast cultivators. We can't keep this space, so it's better for us to stop and run for our lives." If these two demonic beasts hadn't attacked each other, as soon as they saw each other, they wouldn't have wanted to fight to the death in this situation. They were trapped in the immortal palace for 30 years, and finally escaped with great difficulty. Now that the space was about to collapse, they didn't even have time to save their lives. Fight to the death? They weren't stupid. Seeing that these two human-shaped demonic beasts seemed to be quite sincere, Qin's expression slowly relaxed. He shook his hand and withdrew the 3 young real fire sword. At that moment, 2 more flight lights approached them. A human cultivator's voice came from one of them. "Fellow Taoists, please lend us a hand." It was actually a stout middle-stage nascent soul cultivator, with a 9th-ranked demonic beast chasing after him. Although cultivators fought endlessly, they had a different attitude when facing demonic beasts. They didn't hesitate. Jing Xingji brandished his sword aura and shot it towards the beast cultivator behind this person. Yang Qingji also flew up, and his primordial devil aura suddenly exploded. Upon seeing this, the blue and white demonic beasts hastily flew forward and blocked the two people's attacks for the demonic beast chasing after them. The white demonic beast shouted, "All of you stop!" Taking advantage of this obstruction, the stout cultivator landed between Emotienga and the others. He hurriedly cupped his hands towards them and said, "Fellow Taoists, thank you for your help." Upon seeing this person, Emotienga and Qin's gazes met. They were a bit surprised. They knew this person. He was the Danxia sect cultivator they met when they first entered the space, Nanguitian. At that time, this person fought with others over a withered vine full of wood spiritual aura. After they entered the immortal palace, they never saw him again. They didn't expect he'd actually stayed on Mount Lingshan for so long. The one chasing after Nanguitian was a pitch-black 2-winged demonic beast. Upon hearing the white demonic beast shout, It vigilantly looked at the human cultivators who obviously outnumbered them. It also transformed into a dark and thin man and landed. "Old White, what are you doing?" It also spoke the human language with a strange tone. The white demonic beast said, "We've made an agreement with these humans. Escaping is more important, so we won't fight." It then added in a low voice, "They outnumber us, so we can't defeat them." The black demonic beast swept its gaze over them. 5 people and a puppet were all above the nascent soul realm. Among them, 2 were in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, which was equivalent to the 9th rank of its beast cultivators. "All right." The black demonic beast didn't insist. "We're done here. Let's go out and talk." Upon seeing its agreement, the white demonic beast heaved a sigh of relief. It turned towards Qin Shi and said, "Vermilion bird cultivator, we won't take the initiative to attack you again. We hope you won't attack us either." Qin Shi answered, "As long as you don't attack us, we won't go back on our word." "All right then. For the sake of your vermilion bird's breath, we believe you." Once the white demonic beast finished speaking, it called out to its 2 companions, "Let's go." Right after it finished speaking, the 3 demonic beasts turned into flight lights and continued to fly towards the exit. "Let's go too." The collapse of the restrictions was becoming more and more violent. They couldn't stay here for long. Everyone also turned into flight lights and flew towards the foot of the mountain. Chapter 506. At the exit of the space, the 3 demonic beasts in human form disappeared. The 5 of them followed them without hesitation. With a flash of white light, they left the space. When the white light dissipated, they found themselves standing on the island they came from. Mo Tiange heaved a sigh of relief. The collapse of a restriction in an independent space was no joke. Perhaps even the entire space would be destroyed because of it. At that time, everything inside would disappear along with the space, including the people inside. Fortunately, they came out in time and escaped the disaster. The sound of the waves whistled in her ears, and the moist smell of the sea, which she hadn't smelled for a long time. She was touched and took a deep breath. Finally, she was back in this world. Jing Xingji looked up at the sky and muttered, "What a coincidence. We ran into this kind of weather as soon as we came out." Around the island, the waves were monstrous and the sky was covered in dark clouds. Lightning flashed silently from time to time, as if a heavy rain was about to fall. This was the kind of thunderstorm that people living by the sea feared the most. Nan Guitian, who came out with them, looked at the sky and muttered, "This is bad. The wind and waves in the returning ruined sea are much more terrifying than in other places." Mo Tiange turned around and asked, "This? Fellow Taoist Nan, may I know what's terrifying about the wind and waves in the returning ruined sea?" Nan Guitian looked at her with amazement in his eyes. "So it's, fellow Taoist Mo. Back then, everyone said you and your wife died in the immortal palace. I didn't expect fellow Taoist Mo to have other fated chances and form her nascent soul. Congratulations. They didn't leave the immortal palace before the passage disappeared, so the others naturally thought they died inside." Mo Tiange smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Nan, you're too polite. You're the one who's really surprising. You actually didn't come out after so many years." Nan Guitian sighed and said, "There's nothing I can do about it." After sighing, he explained with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Mo isn't from Yunzhong, so you probably don't know much about the returning ruined sea. The returning ruined sea is different from the Eastern Sea and the Northern Sea. In the other seas, if you don't go deep into the sea, you won't encounter any danger. But in the returning ruined sea, there are high-level sea beasts everywhere. If there's a storm, the gales and waves are extremely powerful. Even cultivators can easily die if they don't have enough cultivation." "Really?" Mo Tiange looked up and saw several flashes of lightning flashing in the sky. Although there was no sound of thunder, it seemed like a storm was coming. The returning ruined sea might be dangerous, but we're all nascent soul cultivators, so there's no need to be nervous. Yang Qingji said. "Moreover, this place isn't very far from One Leaf Island. If we fly at full speed, we'll arrive in half a day. One Leaf Island has a defensive array formation. A mere storm is nothing. This, Fellow Taoists' words make sense. A look of surprise appeared on Nan Guotian's face when he saw Yang Qingji, but a smile soon appeared on his face. What do you guys plan to do? Should I hide here? Or should I return to One Leaf Island now? What are your plans, fellow Taoist Nan? Nan Guotian glanced at the three shape-shifted demon beasts that had come out earlier than them. They seemed to be hesitating about where to go, and would occasionally look at them warily. The three of them had lived in the torn space for who knew how many years. They probably knew nothing about the outside world, and didn't know what to do. In my opinion, it's better for us to move together, Nan Guotian said. Everyone understood what he meant. There were demon cultivators nearby. If they split up, who knew if those demon cultivators would attack them? Demon cultivators and human cultivators were natural enemies. Before they could make up their minds, they suddenly heard a sudden clap of thunder. A bolt of lightning struck the sea not far away from them, creating huge waves that were more than 100 feet tall. This clap of thunder was like a signal. Immediately after, lightning struck down one after another, landing on the surface of the sea around the small island. What a strong thunder element aura! Jing Xingji's expression changed slightly. No wonder low-level cultivators call the returning ruin the sea of no return. This kind of power isn't inferior to the thunder element spells of us nascent soul cultivators. Yang Qingji frowned and said in a low voice, "Strange." Upon seeing his strange expression, Emotianga asked, "What's strange about fellow Taoist Yang?" The one who answered was Nan Guotian. His expression was the same as Yang Qingji's. He was a bit puzzled. Although the wind and waves in the returning ruined sea are terrifying, such powerful thunder and lightning are rarely seen. Moreover, they're so frequent. Before they could get an answer, the three shape-shifting demon cultivators nearby suddenly separated. No one knew what they were going to do. Although they didn't attack, everyone had been secretly watching them. As soon as they saw something was wrong, they immediately took out their magic weapons. In the next moment, however, they heard the white demonic beast shout, "Heavenly tribulation! Heavenly tribulation!" He rolled up his sleeves and released the vermilion bird protective barrier. He said, "It's the heavenly tribulation of the demonic beast's shapeshifting." Previously, the space was independent, so heaven and earth couldn't sense them when they shapeshifted. Now, as soon as they left the space, the heavenly tribulation came. His explanation was simple, but everyone present was a nascent soul cultivator, so they understood after a bit of thinking. Demonic beasts could gain spiritual intelligence after advancing to the 8th rank, and could also shapeshift into humans. Before shapeshifting, demonic beasts were just demonic beasts, but after shapeshifting, they could be called demon cultivators. Whether it was in terms of intelligence or strength, demonic beasts were inferior to human cultivators. However, once they became demon cultivators, they would have enough intelligence to use magic weapons. Coupled with their tough bodies, they could stand shoulder to shoulder with human cultivators. Shapeshifting was very important to demonic beasts. Transforming from a beast to a human was considered a heaven-defying act. Therefore, heaven and earth would send down heavenly tribulation when it sensed demonic beasts shapeshifting. Only by going through heavenly tribulation could they successfully shapeshift and become demon cultivators. These three demonic beasts could be considered lucky. They had been inside the torn space, so heaven and earth couldn't sense them. Naturally, there was no heavenly tribulation, and they shapeshifted smoothly. This was the same principle as when Mo Tiange and Yang Qingji formed their nascent souls, without any celestial phenomena. Now that they came out, heaven and earth sensed them and sent down heavenly tribulation. Everyone's expression changed. Heavenly tribulation. Although they hadn't experienced heavenly tribulation before, they weren't low-level cultivators who hadn't experienced it. They knew how terrifying heavenly tribulation was. Moreover, there were three shape-shifting demonic beasts here. Didn't that mean there would be three heavenly tribulations? Let's go. Nan Guotian was the first to shout. He threw out a jade crane, which materialized and carried him into the distance. Once he moved, Mo Tiange and the others followed him without hesitation. Heavenly tribulation didn't recognize people. If they stayed within its range, it would strike them as well. The sound of thunder grew louder and louder. Lightning continuously tore through the dark sky. Dark clouds covered the sky, and piercingly cold gales blew in the surroundings. The waves rose higher and higher, and the sea revealed its ferocious claws. Boom! Another bolt of lightning struck, and exploded not far away from them. The waves surged, and almost threw them off their flying magic weapons. This kind of power definitely wasn't ordinary wind and lightning. It was undoubtedly heavenly lightning. The heavenly tribulation had already begun. Upon realizing this, everyone steered their flying magic weapons and fled at full speed. The heavenly lightning that descended from the heavenly tribulation would slowly become stronger as time passed. This was only the beginning. Hopefully, they could escape the range of the heavenly tribulation before its power increased. However, after flying for a while, the heavenly lightning didn't disappear. Instead, it became stronger and stronger. Emotienga found it strange. They were already quite a distance away from the 3 shape-shifted demon cultivators. The heavenly tribulation shouldn't be that wide, right? Moreover, the heavenly tribulation descended as soon as the 3 shape-shifted demon cultivators left the space. Shouldn't her and Yang Qingji's nascent soul formation phenomena appear soon? While flying, she looked up and saw a thick pillar of lightning coming down from above. Boom! The pillar of lightning landed right next to her, and the resulting airwave almost caused everyone to fall. Something wasn't right. Her intuition told her that something was wrong. When the second lightning pillar fell, Jing Xingji suddenly stopped and said, "Something's wrong. This isn't a shape-shifting heavenly tribulation." "What?" Nan Guotian asked. Jing Xingji's gaze fell on Emotienga, and he looked unprecedentedly frightened. "This is a nascent soul formation heavenly tribulation. Asterisk 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 on One Leaf Island. The wind howled and lightning flashed incessantly. The scariest storm in the sea of returning ruins was about to arrive. According to usual practice, when such weather appeared, all cultivators would stop hunting sea beasts and return to One Leaf Island's market square. The market square's defensive formation would then be fully activated to defend against the storm and prevent damage. One Leaf Island's defensive formation was no small matter. In order to defend against the sea beasts and the ever-changing, terrifying weather in the sea of returning ruins, the most brilliant formation masters in Yunzhong set up layer upon layer of restrictions around the island. They were also perfected by successive generations of formation masters, so it could be said to be the best in Yunzhong. With this defensive formation, for tens of thousands of years, no matter how terrifying the weather was, One Leaf Island had always been safe and sound. Therefore, even though the storm was terrifying, the cultivators who had already returned to One Leaf Island were very relaxed. They took advantage of this rare opportunity to trade with each other, or gather in tea houses to exchange gossip. At that moment, several flight lights flew into the air and stopped below the defensive barrier. The cultivators who noticed this were extremely surprised. It should be known that places like markets had restrictions that prohibited flying, and only high-level cultivators could break through such restrictions. One Leaf Island's restrictions were of the highest level in Yunzhong. Only nascent soul cultivators could not be restricted by the restrictions when the formation was fully activated. The scene in front of them was clearly a gathering of several nascent soul cultivators in the air. Did something happen? Taoist Rui, what's going on? The fat cultivator who had just flown up bowed to the crowd and asked the young Taoist priest who was the closest to him. This young Taoist priest at the mid-nascent soul stage was Taoist Rui, who had the highest cultivation level in 5 Elements Valley. He frowned slightly and stared at one place, then shook his head gently. "I don't know yet." After a pause he said, "It's not normal for so many lightning bolts to suddenly appear. Yes, with such power, even we nascent soul cultivators would find it difficult to escape unscathed, right?" Someone else followed up. Several nascent soul cultivators looked at the flashing lightning bolts where the sea and the sky met, frowning deeply. They all knew that this was unusual, but the wind and lightning looked extraordinarily powerful. If they went out to investigate, it would be a little risky. It's actually a heavenly tribulation. Interesting. While everyone was silent, a voice suddenly came from behind. They turned to look and saw a skinny old man standing behind them with a smile. Seeing this person, everyone was shocked. So it's Taoist Ma. Taoist Rui hurriedly bowed. This old man wore a wrinkled dark blue Taoist robe, carried a gourd on his back, and held a whip in his hand. He was the late nascent soul itinerant cultivator Old Donkey Ma. However, probably because he was in the market, he did not have his donkey with him. Old Donkey Ma smiled until his wrinkles overlapped. He bowed to the crowd in return. After the greetings, Taoist Rui asked impatiently, Taoist Ma, you said that this is a heavenly tribulation? That's right. In the past, I was fortunate enough to encounter a transformed demonic beast in the depths of Return Ruined Sea, and witnessed a heavenly tribulation. This is a transformation heavenly tribulation. A cultivator was extremely shocked. There's actually a demonic beast that transformed so close to One Leaf Island? Isn't it afraid of us human cultivators? Old Donkey Ma stroked his sparse beard and flew to the front of the crowd. He looked at the increasingly dense heavenly tribulation in the distance, and his expression slowly became extremely shocked. Huh, there's actually more than one heavenly tribulation. What? Old Donkey Ma did not answer. He looked at the turbulent sea surface and slowly smiled in surprise. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, there's also that side. It can be considered half. This is really interesting. When did heavenly tribulations become so cheap? There are actually 4 half-heaven tribulations gathered together. Chapter 507. This was going to be interesting. Old Donkey Ma's cultivation wasn't the highest, but he was undoubtedly the most knowledgeable person in Yunzhong. He had seen all sorts of strange things. Old Donkey Ma had seen all sorts of strange things. However, he was sure that this was the first time he had seen something like this in tens of thousands of years. Heavenly tribulations were extremely rare. Even nascent soul realm cultivators rarely saw one. It was said that in ancient times, when cultivators advanced to nascent soul, minor heavenly tribulations would descend. However, there were no more heavenly tribulations for cultivators now. All that was left was the sound of wind and thunder. No one knew the reason. However, many people believed that nascent soul cultivators were far weaker than ancient cultivators, and did not meet the requirements to trigger heavenly tribulations. Hence, there were no more heavenly tribulations. There were only 2 situations in which heavenly tribulations would appear. One was when a demon beast transformed and became a demon cultivator. The other was when a cultivator transformed and became a peak existence in the human world. Demon beasts that could transform usually lived deep in the sea or deep in the mountains. Ordinary cultivators could not see them at all. Even if they did, it would not be so coincidental that they happened to be in the middle of a heavenly tribulation. Only nascent soul cultivators like Old Donkey Ma, who had traveled all over Yunzhong and had good luck, had seen heavenly tribulations. Good luck was because although heavenly tribulations were terrifying, demon beasts that had just gone through heavenly tribulations were very weak. It was a good time to take advantage of them, whether it was taking them in as spirit beasts or killing them for their inner cores and corpses. There were great benefits. Old Donkey Ma's 8th grade spirit beast might have come this way. However, not only did they see heavenly tribulations on One Leaf Island, but there were 4.5 of them. This was much more absurd than the novels of mortals. If the truth was not right in front of them, they would not believe it. Fellow Taoist Ma, are you kidding us? Faced with doubt, Old Donkey Ma lifted his eyelids. I'm just saying, whether you believe it or not, it's none of my business. His attitude of believe it or not made it hard for the others to say anything else. Only Taoist Rui asked seriously, Fellow Taoist Ma, for heavenly tribulations is fine. What's with half of them? This old man also doesn't know. Old Donkey Ma was also puzzled. He raised his whip and pointed at 4 spots on the surface of the sea. Taoist Rui, please take a look. These 4 lightning pillars are very thick, and their might can be imagined. They must be the center of the heavenly tribulation. However, the lightning pillars on this side are slightly weaker than the other 4, but they are much stronger than the heavenly thunder at the periphery. That's why this old man said that these are 4 half-heavenly tribulations. Everyone took a closer look and found that it was indeed so. Someone immediately thought, "Fellow Taoists, no matter what's going on, there must be a demonic beast undergoing the form transformation tribulation. Isn't this a good opportunity for us?" That's right. The others were tempted to make a move. Nascent soul cultivators like them were not like low-grade cultivators, who could afford medicinal pills and top-grade treasures, as long as they had money. In the nascent soul realm, treasures of heaven and earth were all helpful to cultivation. In the current world, treasures of heaven and earth were very rare. Not to mention whether they still existed. Even if they did, the nascent soul cultivators, who found them would keep them for themselves. Very few would trade them. But now, there were actually several demonic beasts undergoing heavenly tribulations in the vicinity of One Leaf Island. If they succeeded, they would become 8th grade demonic beasts. The inner cores of 8th grade demonic beasts could be used to refine medicinal pills for nascent soul cultivators. And their corpses could be used to refine top-grade Dharma treasures. It was very difficult for them to find an 8th grade demonic beast on a normal day. Although old Donkey Ma wore a smile on his face, his tone was somewhat disapproving. He said slowly, "Fellow Taoists, don't think too simply. One heavenly tribulation is fine, but 4 half-heavenly tribulations are so close to our One Leaf Island. I'm afraid the One Leaf Island's defensive array formation will also be impacted. This it can't be, right?" When it came to array formations, Taoist Ruyi was somewhat doubtful. "Fellow Taoist Ma, the array formations and restrictions of One Leaf Island have been continuously perfected and repaired by generations of array formation masters. They are not inferior to the mountain guarding arrays of large sections. There have been no accidents in the past tens of thousands of years. In these tens of thousands of years, has there ever been a situation where 4 half-heavenly tribulations appeared at the same time?" Old Donkey Ma said slowly, his tone becoming more and more solemn. "This heavenly tribulation has only just begun. As time passes, its range will become wider, and its power will also increase. Whether One Leaf Island will be able to survive is hard to say." On One Leaf Island, the nascent soul cultivators discussed one after another, guessing the truth of the matter. Meanwhile, on the sea near the island, countless heavenly thunder turned the surrounding sea into a battlefield of azuras. Dark clouds surged in the sky, lightning flashed incessantly, and piercingly cold astral winds howled. Thick lightning pillars fell from the sky incessantly, and the rumbling sounds did not stop. The sea beasts living nearby were in deep trouble. Under such heavenly thunder, there was no possibility of them surviving at all. For a time, countless sea beast carcasses floated to the surface of the sea, and their blood dyed the seawater red. Nanguatian made a hand seal in a sorry state. Braving the astral winds and heavenly thunder, he once again took out his defensive Dharma treasure. He regretted it so much that his intestines turned green. 30 years ago, he saw that the dawning pill sect was declining day by day. He had been stuck at the mid-stage nascent soul formation realm for several hundred years without being able to make a breakthrough, and he could not find any outstanding talents in the sect. In desperation, he hid in a secret place in the returning ruined sea and went into seclusion, hoping to use the rich spirit chi and rich resources of the primordial land to break through to the late-stage nascent soul stage in one go and restore the dawning pill sect to its former glory. Over the past 30 years, he had taken great risks. He had to be wary of cultivators who had the same idea as him, and he also had to be wary of the high-level demon beasts that lived in the space. He had been on tenterhooks, and every step he took was difficult. Fortunately, his efforts had paid off. The bottleneck that he had been stuck at for a long time finally showed signs of loosening. At this critical moment, the Immortal Palace suddenly collapsed. Seeing that the space was about to be destroyed, he had no choice but to leave the space and escape. The shape-shifting demon cultivator that had been chasing after him had been watching him for a long time. However, he had been cautious and had set up layers of restrictions in his temporary cave abode, so the demon cultivator could not do anything to him. When the Immortal Palace collapsed, the demon cultivator had wanted to kill him in one fell swoop, so that it could obtain his nascent soul to aid its own cultivation. Nanguitian knew that there were still a few demon cultivators in the space, so he could not afford to get entangled with them. Thus, he immediately asked for help when he saw that there were others in the space. No matter who they were, as long as they were human cultivators, they could negotiate. However, if they were demon cultivators, then it would be a matter of life and death. He thought that he was quite lucky. These people had saved him, and they had no intention of killing him to steal his treasures. However, he regretted it now. What did they mean by quite lucky? He was extremely unlucky to have anything to do with these people. Forget about the shape-shifting demon cultivators. After all, demon beasts had to undergo shape-shifting heavenly tribulations to take human forms. However, what was going on with them now? That girl who had been lucky enough to obtain Fu Yaozi's inheritance actually had a nascent soul heavenly tribulation. The nascent soul heavenly tribulation was something that no one had ever heard of in the past hundreds of thousands of years. It was one thing if it was just one, but because of that girl's nascent soul heavenly tribulation, that damned disciple of the Guifang demon monarch had actually triggered half a heavenly tribulation. If he had stayed out of this matter, he would definitely have tried to rope them in after the heavenly tribulation. He wasn't an ignorant fool. He knew what a nascent soul heavenly tribulation, which hadn't appeared in hundreds of thousands of years, represented. If a cultivator could safely pass the heavenly tribulation, they would definitely possess great potential. However, he was also trapped in the heavenly tribulation and was facing the heavenly lightning, God. Nanguitian had schemed so much for the sake of the dawning Pilsex orthodoxy, and he was about to lose his life. Why was he so unlucky? However, it was too late for him to run now. The heavenly tribulation had already descended, and he was in the middle of it. Even if he turned around and ran, he wasn't confident that he could escape unscathed from so many heavenly lightning bolts. Therefore, he could only go all out. If he was lucky, he might be able to keep his life. However, aside from fellow Taoist Qin, these people were all in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. Two of them had just advanced to the nascent soul realm, so it wouldn't be good for them to face the heavenly tribulation head-on. With that thought in mind, Nanguitian turned around and discovered that things were out of his expectations. Emotienga was fighting against the heavenly tribulation. Magic weapons such as the art of primordial singular energy, the white silk handkerchief, the heaven and earth fan, and the 8 trigrams of Tai Chi were all out. She also used a rare defensive talisman for the nascent soul realm. Moreover, the clothes she was wearing also seemed to be some kind of treasure. Sometimes, when the heavenly lightning that was slightly weaker struck her, she would be able to withstand it. Back then, she obtained a white robe from an ancient deification cultivator. It was still intact after hundreds of thousands of years, so it was obviously a top-grade defensive magic weapon. She had already undergone the vermilion bird's body tempering, so he didn't need this robe. So he refined it again and gave it to her for protection. Next to her, a cultivator with fluttering white sleeves stepped forward from time to time to block some of the heavenly lightning for her. He was wearing the uniform of the great ancient cultivation group in the independent space, so his defense was incomparably strong. At first, Nanguitian thought this was a cultivator who didn't want to reveal his identity. Later on, he discovered that although this person was nimble and strong, he didn't have the slightest human aura. He wasn't a human, but a puppet. An early-stage nascent soul puppet. Nanguitian knew this must be a fated chance she obtained from the immortal palace. He almost couldn't control his jealousy. How could this girl be so lucky? She was imprisoned in the immortal palace, but not only did she form her nascent soul, she came out smoothly, and she even obtained such a treasure. On the other side, Yang Qingji was releasing his primordial devil aura to fight against the heavenly lightning. When he noticed some of the heavenly lightning was rushing towards him, he was extremely shocked. He didn't understand how he triggered the heavenly tribulation. Soon after, Jing Xingji analyzed the situation. When he came out of the independent space, he should have triggered the nascent soul celestial phenomenon, but Emotienga triggered the heavenly tribulation instead. Compared to the nascent soul celestial phenomenon, the heavenly tribulation was a level higher. Since he was in the middle of the heavenly tribulation, he was also sensed. As a result, the nascent soul celestial phenomenon was upgraded and turned into a heavenly tribulation. However, because he was only implicated, the power of the heavenly tribulation was greatly reduced, so it could only be considered half a heavenly tribulation. Since it was only half a heavenly tribulation, it was much easier for him to deal with it. After all, he cultivated the primordial devil art. Moreover, he also absorbed all the primordial devil aura in the immortal palace, so his body was full of devil aura. Even if it was lightning magic, which devil cultivators were most afraid of, he wouldn't be unable to withstand it. As for Jing Xingji and Qin Shi, although it wasn't easy for them, they weren't in a very difficult situation either. This made Nan Guotian feel baffled. How could these people be so strong? As the head Grand Supreme Elder of one of the 5 great Dao cultivation groups in Yunzhong, when did his vision become so narrow? Chapter 508. The thunder in the sky gradually subsided, and the heavenly tribulation came to an end. Emotianga looked exhausted. She sat cross-legged in the air, and took advantage of the gap between the heavenly tribulation to recover some spiritual aura. She didn't expect she would trigger the nascent soul heavenly tribulation. She always thought it would be like when Qin Shi formed his nascent soul, where a nascent soul celestial phenomenon would appear. But now that things had come to this, she had no choice but to endure it. Heavenly tribulation wouldn't stop just because you didn't want to. She could only rejoice that she obtained a deification cultivator's defensive treasure robe in the immortal palace, and made a nascent soul puppet. Otherwise, the heavenly tribulation would be difficult. According to ancient books, the minor heavenly tribulation in the nascent soul realm has 9 stages. With each stage, its power will gradually increase. If you pass the heavenly tribulation, the power of the heavenly thunder will remold your body and advance your cultivation level. If you can't, you'll be turned into ashes. Tianga, you have to hold on. Qin Shi's voice entered her ears. She opened her eyes and looked at him. The sea breeze was fierce and lightning streaked across the sky from time to time. Qin Shi looked at her with firm and gentle eyes. She smiled and nodded at him. Then she took a deep breath, stood up, and took out her magic weapons again. Her path of cultivation could be said to be bumpy and lucky, but there were always many variables. Every realm breakthrough was accompanied by many accidents. When she was building her foundation, not only did the celestial phenomenon appear, but it also lasted for more than a year. When she was forming her gold core, her fellow disciples at Xianqing School almost thought she was forming her nascent soul. Now that she was forming her nascent soul, she actually triggered the nascent soul heavenly tribulation that didn't exist anymore. She didn't know why this happened, but it was most likely related to her physique and cultivation technique. She didn't know whether this was bad luck or good luck. Maybe, after experiencing more trials, she would go further than others. Boom! With a loud noise, the 4th stage of the heavenly tribulation was about to come. Emotianga pointed her finger, and the white silk handkerchief turned into invisible mist, firmly protecting her. At the same time, she mobilized all the spiritual aura in her body, ready to go. In the sky, more and more white lightning gathered, illuminating the dark sea as bright as day. A moment later, a lightning pillar finally formed, but it silently struck down. Emotianga raised her hand and waved the heaven and earth fan. Countless flowers and plants flew out and collided with the lightning. Boom! Unsurprisingly, the flowers and plants transformed from spiritual qi were all sent flying by the heavenly lightning. However, after the collision, the heavenly lightning also disappeared without a trace. Emotianga's body swayed, but in the end, she managed to stand firm. Apart from the lightning pillar in the middle of the heavenly tribulation, there were also countless lesser heavenly thunders in the surroundings. These heavenly thunders struck the surface of the sea and set off huge waves. She took a handful of pills and stuffed them into her mouth, gasping for breath. Looking up, there were flashes of lightning everywhere on the surface of the sea. The pale white light illuminated the blood-red surface of the sea, which was exceptionally demonic and terrifying. Boom! Another loud sound rang out. This time, It was the manifestation tribulation of the demonic cultivator not far away. The transformation of demonic beasts into demonic cultivators was also a 9-stage heavenly tribulation. They started their tribulation at about the same time, so they should be at the 5th stage now. Roar! A deafening roar rang out, and a green-winged giant beast appeared on the surface of the sea a little further away. It was the green-winged demonic beast that had revealed its true form and faced the heavenly lightning. Boom! Boom! The heavenly lightning struck mercilessly, hitting the huge body of the green-winged giant beast. It was knocked back several dozen feet before it staggered and stopped. The power of lightning-type spells was formidable, not to mention that the heavenly lightning was the power of heaven and earth. This green-winged giant beast had a strong wood element aura, so it undoubtedly practiced wood-type spells. Moreover, the wood element just happened to be restrained by the lightning element. If this demonic beast hadn't advanced to the 8th rank long ago, it probably wouldn't have been able to withstand the might of the heavenly lightning. However, whether it was this demonic beast or the other 2 demonic beasts, they were undoubtedly distant past era demonic beasts. They had cultivated in the distant past era environment for a long time, so they were much stronger than the demonic beasts of today. Presumably, they had a higher chance of surviving the heavenly tribulation of transformation. Emotienga swept a cursory glance over them. She didn't worry about these demonic beasts. She still had to pass her own heavenly tribulation, so why should she worry about others? Moreover, her situation was even worse than these demonic beasts. She had just advanced to the next realm, so her magic weapon hadn't been refined yet. She also didn't have a strong body like these demonic beasts, so she had no idea whether she could survive the 9th stage of the heavenly tribulation. After a while, the 5th stage of the heavenly tribulation also arrived. The heavenly lightning struck her body with great power. She felt her brain go numb, and a stream of blood rushed up her throat. She struggled to hold on, suppressing her restless spiritual aura. When the heavenly lightning dissipated, Qinshi helped her up. Hold on 2 more times. I'll take action during the last 2 times. Emotienga swallowed a handful of medicinal pills. Right now, she almost treated medicinal pills like sugar pills, eating them like they cost nothing. When her breathing stabilized, she asked, "What about you?" Qinshi was right next to her. When the heavenly lightning struck, he was also within the range of the heavenly tribulation, so he also had to defend himself. "I know what I'm doing," he said. Emotienga nodded, believing him without a doubt. Then came the 6th stage of the heavenly tribulation. Rumble. This time, the thunder was even louder. The heavenly lightning was twice as thick as before, and it struck down. Emotienga didn't know whether she could withstand it or not, but the heavenly tribulation couldn't be avoided. It wouldn't count unless it hit the person who was going through the tribulation. She turned her wrist, unfolding the heaven and earth fan. She poured all her spiritual aura into it, and with a crane cry, a red-crowned crane flew out of the fan to meet the heavenly lightning. The heavenly lightning hit the red-crowned crane. Without much effort, the crane turned into spiritual aura and disappeared. Soon after, it hit Emotienga squarely. Chi. The mist formed by the white silk handkerchief was hit by the heavenly lightning and almost dissipated. As for Emotienga, she was hit by the powerful force and lost her balance in the air. She fell several hundred feet before she staggered and regained her balance. When she saw the half-broken white silk handkerchief, her expression changed slightly. This magic weapon she obtained from Zhong Muling had been refined by her since she was in the foundation building realm. Its defense was very strong, and it had never failed. But today it was actually pierced through. The 6th wave of the heavenly tribulation was already this powerful. What about the 7th wave? She wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth and looked up at the sky. The tribulation clouds were gathering again. The next wave would be the 7th wave of the heavenly tribulation. She swallowed medicinal pills again, seizing the time to recover a bit of spiritual aura. She didn't have any powerful defensive magic weapons in her hands, except for the white robe she was wearing. If it didn't work, she could only forcibly endure it. Presumably, this defensive magic weapon she obtained from an ancient deification cultivator should be able to save her life, right? Rumble. The heavenly lightning appeared again. This time, its color was a bit deeper than before, and carried a hint of gold. Emotienga took a deep breath, and manipulated the jade bone puppet to meet it. Crack! The heavenly lightning struck the jade bone puppet, causing its body to emit light smoke. Its spiritual aura protective cover was instantly destroyed, and its nascent soul momentum instantly dissipated. Fortunately, the puppet's frame was the crystal skeleton of an ancient deification cultivator. The white robe it was wearing was also a powerful defensive magic weapon, so it wasn't destroyed. Emotienga put the jade bone puppet, which had temporarily lost its cultivation level, into her Qianquan ring. The seventh wave of the heavenly tribulation was at least twice as powerful as the sixth wave, since it could strike a nascent soul puppet until it lost its cultivation level. There were still 2 more waves of the heavenly tribulation. After dispersing the small heavenly lightning next to him, Qinshi forced out several drops of blood essence and wiped the 3 young real fire sword. The sword immediately shone with a dazzling red light. Senior martial brother? Emotienga was surprised to see this. What did he want to do by using his blood essence? Recover your spiritual aura. Qinshi shouted at her. Emotienga paused for a moment, then obediently swallowed the medicinal pills and sat cross-legged in the air. No matter what he wanted to do, she didn't have enough confidence to pass the heavenly tribulation, so the best choice was to cooperate with him. After a while, more and more tribulation clouds appeared. The heavenly lightning finished brewing and struck again. This time, the power of the heavenly lightning was several times stronger than the last time. Before it fell, huge waves of more than 10 feet high were set off on the sea, and the roar was deafening. Qinshi pushed with his right hand, and the 3 young real fire sword turned into rays of red light. Soon after, he and the sword went to meet the heavenly lightning. Before, he didn't make a move and let Emotienga face the heavenly tribulation alone for 2 reasons. First, her strength would improve greatly only if she personally faced the power of the heavenly tribulation. Second, he had to save his strength to help her pass the last 2 heavenly tribulations. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to face the real danger with his full strength, and they would both die under the heavenly tribulation. As the heavenly tribulation grew stronger, the cultivators on One Leaf Island gradually noticed something unusual. Look, someone shouted. What a big storm! Outside One Leaf Island's defensive formation, huge waves swept over and smashed fiercely on the defensive shield. At first, the defensive shield only shook a little, but as the waves got higher and higher, and the impact became more and more concentrated, the defensive shield started to shake uneasily. Tsunami! An experienced and knowledgeable cultivator's expression changed in horror. With such power, it was undoubtedly a tsunami. If there were cultivators who didn't make it to One Leaf Island in time, they probably wouldn't have a chance to survive. Everyone don't panic. One Leaf Island's market square, which was formed by various big forces, immediately came out to calm everyone down. Our One Leaf Island has nascent soul seniors keeping watch. Everything will be fine. Calm down and return to your positions. That's right. Nothing has ever happened to One Leaf Island in its history. Someone chimed in, then looked up at the sky. Everyone look. Those nascent soul seniors are still there. All the cultivators looked up one after another. When they saw several nascent soul cultivators still standing under the protective shield in the sky, they finally calmed down a little and went back to their shops or tea houses to sit down. Even if the sky collapsed, these nascent soul seniors would be there to support it. That was what they thought. At that moment, however, these nascent soul seniors weren't as relaxed as they thought. The power of the heavenly tribulation is actually this strong. Taoist Rui muttered to himself. Someone said, "What's Taoist Rui afraid of? Could it be that the restrictions on One Leaf Island can't hold on? That shouldn't be the case, right? The way I see it, the heavenly tribulation is almost over. It's time for us to go out and take a look." Taoist Rui glanced at that person and scoffed. Fellow Taoist Song, you're being too naive. The further it goes, the more powerful the heavenly tribulation will be. If it's just one heavenly tribulation, with One Leaf Island's restrictions, it shouldn't be a problem. but 4 half-heavenly tribulations. I can't guarantee that One Leaf Island will be unscathed. 5 Elements Valley was founded on formations. Taoist Rui was the cultivator with the highest cultivation base in 5 Elements Valley, as well as the most outstanding formation master in the world. No one dared to disregard his words. That can't be right. One Leaf Island's restrictions really can't hold on. The cultivator from before asked anxiously. Taoist Rui's expression softened. It's only a possibility. As for how powerful the heavenly tribulation was, it was just a guess. He couldn't say for sure either. When Taoist Rui saw old Donkey Ma looking into the distance without saying anything, he couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Taoist Ma, what do you think?" After a while, old Donkey Ma finally shook his head lightly. He looked at the lightning flickering on the surface of the sea and said, "It's not easy to pick up this bargain." Chapter 509. Under the tremendous might of the heavenly tribulation, the red light formed by the 3 young real fire sword collided with the heavenly thunder. Boom! This loud noise created a big hole in the sea. Even the seabed was affected, and the distant coast and One Leaf Island shook. Boom! Boom! Several more thunderclaps were heard. The other people's 8th tribulation came down one after another. The defensive barrier above their heads shook and almost broke. Taoist Rui's expression changed slightly. He said, "Not good." Then he turned into a flight light and flew down. The range of the 8th heavenly tribulation exceeded everyone's expectations. One Leaf Island's restrictions showed faint signs of collapsing. Taoist Rui was rushing over to take charge of the formation. If the formation was not repaired in time, One Leaf Island would probably be destroyed when the 9th heavenly tribulation arrived. One Leaf Island was only a market square, but if it was really destroyed, it wouldn't be good for the big forces. In their sects, most of the cultivators in the core formation realm and above came from One Leaf Island. The other cultivators from the big sects hesitated for a moment before they also turned into flight lights and followed Taoist Rui. The opportunity was rare, but One Leaf Island couldn't be destroyed. In the air, only old Donkey Ma and 2 cultivators unrelated to the big sects were left. "Fellow Taoist Ma," one of them said, "in your opinion, this 9th tribulation?" Old Donkey Ma glanced at them and said with a faint smile, "Fellow Taoists, I can't say for sure about this. If we want to take advantage of it, we can only rely on our luck and means." Aside from the nascent soul cultivators on One Leaf Island, Qin was forced to retreat by the 8th wave of the heavenly tribulation. He only managed to stabilize himself after falling several hundred feet. As for the red light formed by the 3 young real fire sword, most of it had already dissipated. "Senior Marshal Brother!" Emotinga shouted. This time, Qin blocked most of the power of the tribulation, so the impact she suffered was actually smaller than the 7th tribulation. Qin waved his hand to show that he was fine. He swallowed a medicinal pill and seized the time to recover his spiritual aura. Emotinga saw that he didn't seem to be seriously injured, so she also sat cross-legged to adjust her breath. After the 8th tribulation, the sea regained its temporary calm. Yang Qingji also successfully passed the 8th tribulation. The power of his heavenly tribulation was halved, which was much better than Emotinga's. Moreover, he had the heavenly demon tower. Among the 5 holy artifacts, it was a truly powerful magic treasure. Ever since he obtained it, he had refined it for several decades. Even though he had just formed his nascent soul, it was still quite powerful. As for the 3 demonic beasts, the green-winged giant beast was the most heavily injured. Its cultivation was the lowest, and it was a wood elemental beast, so it was perfectly countered by the heavenly lightning. However, it had transformed for a long time, and its body was tough. Even though it was injured, it still managed to hold on. Needless to say, the other 2 demonic beasts were already at the 9th rank, and they were stronger than the green-winged giant beast. On the surface of the sea, the 3 beasts and 2 humans were accumulating their strength, waiting for the most crucial 9th heaven tribulation to descend. If they survived this heavenly tribulation, they would reach the heavens in a single bound. When the demonic beasts officially became beast cultivators, Their already strong bodies would be strengthened further, and their abilities would also go up a level. Emotianga and Yang Qingji's strength would also increase greatly, and their future prospects would be bright. In the sky, the faint sound of thunder could be heard. The tribulation clouds continued to gather, but the heavenly thunder did not descend. Jing Xingji looked at the sky worriedly. This wasn't a good sign. The longer the tribulation clouds gathered, the more powerful the upcoming heavenly tribulation would be. Apart from the person facing the tribulation, outsiders like them who were in the tribulation would also be implicated. He looked at Qin Shi and Emotianga, then clenched his teeth angrily. Why was he so unlucky to run into these two jinxes? Not to mention being trapped in the immortal palace for dozens of years. After all, he obtained a lot of benefits. But now, he was implicated by the heavenly tribulation for no reason. What was going on? Nascent soul tribulation was something that didn't exist in the current cultivation world. Yet they were able to attract it. Unfortunately, he couldn't run even if he wanted to. If they couldn't pass the tribulation, he wouldn't be able to either. It was too late to say all this now. The heavenly tribulation was right in front of him. What else could he do? He stared at the still water sword he meticulously refined, pondered for a long time, then sighed. Fellow Taoist Nan. Jing Xingji glanced at Nan Guotian, who wasn't far away. Nan Guotian had just finished adjusting his breath. Although he wasn't prepared at first and looked a bit embarrassed, he was an experienced nascent soul cultivator. So he adjusted his mentality and faced the heavenly tribulation rationally. Upon hearing Jing Xingji's voice, he shifted his gaze. Fellow Taoist, what can I do for you? Jing Xingji looked at Yang Qingji and said, if they don't pass the tribulation, we'll probably have to bear the remaining power of the heavenly tribulation. What do you think, fellow Taoist Nan? Nan Guotian hesitated for a moment, then said with a smile, what else can I do? Let's wait and see. Jing Xingji didn't seem to be joking with him at all. He said solemnly, fellow Taoist Nan, the heavenly tribulation is coming. Do you still want to talk nonsense? We can't escape the scope of the heavenly tribulation. Helping them is helping ourselves. I'll go help those two. I'll leave fellow Taoist Yang to you. What do you think? Jing Xingji didn't wait for him to answer. He turned around and flew towards Emotianga. Nan Guotian sighed silently as he stared at Jing Xingji's back. Thunder rumbled in the sky. The ninth wave of the heavenly tribulation was about to finish brewing. Qin Shi and Emotianga stood up and prepared to deal with it. Both of them had solemn expressions on their faces. They were ready to go. Whether they lived or died, whether they could reach the heavens in a single bound or stop on the path to immortality, it all depended on this. The heavenly lightning hadn't descended yet, but the howling of gales had already resounded. Huge waves rose and fell on the surface of the sea like a huge, malevolent beast that wanted to swallow everything. Boom! The tribulation clouds finally finished gathering. Under the lightning, traces of golden heavenly lightning could be seen in the tribulation clouds. Emotianga's heart sank. Golden lightning. This ninth wave of the heavenly tribulation was genuine golden lightning. Golden lightning was one of the most powerful lightning-type spells. Her luck was really too good. She didn't have much time to think. The golden lightning of the ninth wave of the heavenly tribulation had already struck her. She took out the half-broken white silk handkerchief and took out all the magic weapons she could possibly use. Even if all the treasures she had were destroyed, she had to withstand this heavenly tribulation. The golden lightning was dazzling. The first to meet the heavenly tribulation head-on was still Qin Shi's 3-yang real fire sword. Although he had a lot of treasures on him, most of his divine abilities were based on this natal magic weapon. The golden lightning was blocked by the 3-yang real fire sword, but it only stopped for a moment before it smashed the sword lights and continued to attack Emotianga. The moment the sword formation was smashed, Qin Shi's mind was greatly injured, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. The 3-yang real fire sword was his natal magic weapon. It had been nourished for 200 years, so it could hurt both people and people. Emotianga's heart skipped a beat when she saw this, but the heavenly tribulation was right in front of her. She clenched her teeth and attacked the golden lightning with several magic weapons one after another. The only defensive magic weapons she had were the white silk handkerchief and the white robe. Now that the white silk handkerchief was half destroyed, the white robe alone might not be able to resist the golden lightning, so she could only use offense as defense. Boom! The spirit cloud's Rui collided with the golden lightning and was instantly smashed into pieces. Then, the magic weapons Lord Taoist Jinghe gave her when she formed her gold core, flying swords, stone seals, jade bottles, and so on, all went up to meet the golden lightning. Under the self-destructing attacks of several magic weapons, the golden lightning's momentum weakened a bit, but it still pounced on her with indomitable will. In such a short period of time, Emotienga had almost used up all the offensive magic weapons she could use. Seeing that the golden lightning was still incomparably powerful, she had no choice but to open the heaven and earth fan, determined to risk her life. If she couldn't pass the heavenly tribulation, she would die. No matter how many magic weapons she had, they would be useless. Swish! The heaven and earth fan met the golden lightning and made a soft sound. In an instant, Emotienga was greatly shocked. She clearly felt that under the heavenly tribulation, the golden lightning carried the power of heaven and earth. In comparison, her own power was so insignificant. Could she really pass the heavenly tribulation? Until now, when she directly faced the ninth wave of the heavenly tribulation, she suddenly had such doubts. At that moment she heard a clear sound. Not far away, a sword light shone and slowly turned into countless sword lights. In the end, the sword lights gathered into a ball and rushed towards the golden lightning with incredible speed. Cough! She took a deep breath, stood up and muttered, "The gain and loss sword of the three swords of the secular world. You're finally willing to use your unique skill?" When the sword lights encountered the golden lightning, they split into two and attacked from both sides. Boom! The sound of the collision this time was even louder than the previous one. On Jing Xingji's side, however, he didn't stop. He also forced out his blood essence. The sword lights gathered again, and once again attacked the golden lightning. Boom! Boom! With another two sword strikes, the golden lightning's periphery was smashed, and its power was greatly reduced. Puff! Jing Xingji's face was deathly pale. He coughed up a mouthful of blood, but his whole body relaxed. "I've used all three sword strikes. I've done you guys justice." Emotienga was still fighting against the golden lightning. Although the spiritual aura released by the heaven and earth fan was being compressed inch by inch, she was still doing her best to hold on. She didn't know whether she could hold on or not. But if she gave up, she would only die. She swallowed a medicinal pill, then made a hand seal. A red light appeared indistinctly in his dantian. The red light became brighter and brighter, until it gradually deepened into the color of fire. Soon after, a simple and unadorned longbow burning with flames emerged from his body. He held the bow and pulled the bowstring. Flames sprang out of his arm and formed the shape of an arrow on the bow. He bent the bow like a full moon and aimed at the golden lightning. He then let go, and the flame arrow flew towards the golden lightning as fast as a meteor. The cry of a phoenix resounded. The flame arrow turned into a fiery red vermilion bird and collided with the golden lightning. Boom! The power this time was far greater than before. The incomparably powerful golden lightning finally couldn't bear it and shook, dissipating more than half of it. Cough! Qingxi frowned. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and tried to condense the vermilion bird's flames again. However, the arrow just now almost exhausted his remaining strength. The vermilion bird's flames he released couldn't condense and form a flame arrow. Whether it was Jing Xingji or Qingxi, they couldn't attack again. Emotienga clenched her teeth and touched the space between her eyebrows, forcing out several drops of blood essence and smearing them on the heaven and earth fan. In an instant, the heaven and earth fan shone brightly. Blood essence was the purest part of a cultivator's body. Every cultivator above the core formation realm knew how to use blood essence to strengthen their magic weapons. However, once blood essence was used, their cultivation level would be greatly damaged, so not everyone was willing to use it. She didn't use it before because it was her last resort. If she used her blood essence and couldn't withstand the heavenly tribulation, she could only resign herself to fate. Now, in order to help her, Qin Shi and Jing Xingji didn't hesitate to use their blood essence, causing their strength to be greatly damaged. They couldn't attack again, so she didn't need to hold back anymore. Whether she lived or died, this was the gamble. Under the nourishment of the blood essence, the momentum of the heaven and earth fan suddenly soared. Emotinga made a hand seal, and countless rocks, flowers flew out of the fan and attacked the golden lightning. Boom, boom, boom. The sound lingered on, and the golden lightning was scattered little by little. However, in the end, the golden lightning still wasn't completely defeated. Feeling the spiritual aura in her body slowly dissipating, Emotinga smiled bitterly. Was her path to immortality really going to end today? I'm not willing. I'm still a little bit away, just a little bit away. She turned to look at Qin Shi. Senior Marshal brother, I'm really sorry. If it weren't for me, you'd definitely be able to go further, right? Qin Shi smiled back at her. Although he also felt very regretful, he didn't regret this kind of ending. In the next moment, she heard Jing Xingji's incredulous voice. This is, roar. A deafening roar rang out. From the heaven and earth fan, an azure dragon soared up to meet the golden lightning. Chapter 510. Azure Dragon. Qin Shi immediately remembered that the heaven and earth fan was made from the bones of the azure dragon, which had a strong azure dragon breath. Perhaps there was a problem with the refining method, or his tool refining skills weren't up to standard. But after the heaven and earth fan was successfully refined, the azure dragon breath almost disappeared. Could it be that the azure dragon breath didn't disappear, but just hid? Divine beasts were psychic, just like how his vermilion bird bow recognized itself as its master. The azure dragon was also a divine beast. Maybe Mo Gu was too weak at that time, so the azure dragon breath didn't want to recognize her as its master. Now Tian Gu had advanced to the nascent soul realm, and her strength was much stronger. Under the heavenly tribulation, if she died, the heaven and earth fan, as her natal magic weapon, would also be destroyed, and the breath of the azure dragon would naturally disappear completely. So the hidden breath of the azure dragon was stimulated? These were only Qin Shi's guesses, but he couldn't think of any other reason to explain the current situation. The azure dragon met the golden lightning bolt with its mouth wide open, and fiercely collided with it. After the three young real fire sword, the three swords of red dust, the vermilion bird bow, and the self-destruction of Mo's countless magic weapons, the power of the golden lightning had been greatly reduced. After being hit by the azure dragon, its power was finally exhausted, and it gradually disappeared. The ninth heavenly tribulation passed just like that. Emotinga stood in the air a little disbelieving. Azure dragon? How could an azure dragon suddenly appear? She looked at the heaven and earth fan in her hand. After this battle, this natal magic weapon's light was dim, and it was badly damaged. Its spiritual aura was also exhausted, let alone the azure dragon breath. Ahem! She didn't have time to think. Her chi and blood were surging inside her. She realized that her spiritual aura was exhausted, and she was seriously injured. She had withstood the heavenly tribulation several times and exhausted all her means. Even though she had gone through the 5 spirits cultivation method, her body and meridians were still badly injured. Now that the heavenly tribulation was over and she relaxed, she almost didn't have the strength to stand in the air. Emoga! Qin Shi shouted. He used the last bit of spiritual aura he had left and rushed toward her. Emotinga forced herself to be alert and smiled at him. The next moment, she really couldn't stand anymore. If Qin Shi wasn't next to her, she probably would have fallen. Huge waves surged under her feet, and the sea looked ferocious. Not far away, Yang Qingji's 9th heavenly tribulation had also ended. Regardless of his motives, Nan Guotian had still made his move in the end. The power of his heavenly tribulation had been halved, so it wasn't as dangerous. However, he still used up all his magic treasures and exhausted his spiritual energy. As for those 3 demonic beasts, Emotinga didn't pay any attention to them. She also didn't have the strength to pay attention to them. The heavenly tribulation gradually passed, and the heavenly lightning dissipated. However, the resulting tsunami did not stop. In fact, it was growing more and more powerful. Cough cough. Jing Xingji coughed twice, swallowed a healing medicinal pill, and stood up. Although he used his trump card, his situation was much better than Mo Tiange and Qin Shi's. At least he still had the strength to move. How strange. He steadied himself on the flying sword and looked up at the sky. Although we've never seen a real heavenly tribulation, shouldn't there be a celestial phenomenon after the heavenly tribulation? Once he said that, Qin Shi also raised his head. Sure enough, there seemed to be signs of spiritual aura gathering in the sky, but the clouds were still densely covered and hadn't dissipated. As he thought this, he suddenly saw a few streaks of light flying over from the direction of One Leaf Island. He frowned. Not good. Let's go. All of them were seriously injured, and their spiritual aura was exhausted. Even if it was a core formation cultivator, they wouldn't be able to deal with him casually like they usually did. Moreover, someone who dared to fly on the sea in this kind of weather and had this kind of speed was most likely a nascent soul cultivator. If the other party had bad intentions, they could be said to be at the mercy of others. The others weren't stupid. Yang Qingji's expression changed slightly. He suddenly withdrew his aura and fell straight into the sea with a plop. Of course, he wasn't committing suicide, he just hid in the sea. Qin Shi didn't know whether he had some kind of secret technique that could allow him to escape from the sea. Otherwise, with his current condition and the huge waves in the sea, he might not be able to survive. Jing Xingji looked at the several streaks of light and asked, "What about you too? I don't want to take you away. Just take care of yourself," Qin Shi said. An inconspicuous bead suddenly appeared in his hand. This bead emitted a faint luster, and in an instant, the light entered his body. "Let's go." He put the bead away, held the semi-conscious Mo Tiange in his arms, and instantly turned into a flight light, disappearing into the sea under the cover of the waves. Hey, they're leaving so fast. Jing Xingji was dumbfounded. What was that thing? It seemed like it recovered its spiritual aura after using it for a while. However, now wasn't the time to explore this. He shook his head, stepped on his flying sword and followed them. The several streaks of light from One Leaf Island soon arrived in front of them. The sea was almost dyed blood red, and there were a lot of dead sea beasts floating on the surface. However, there weren't any beast cultivators who had taken human form as they expected. Everyone was puzzled when they saw Nan Guotian. Fellow Taoist Nan? As the leader of one of the 5 great Tao groups in Yunzhong, Nan Guotian had a lot of friends, so he knew everyone in front of him. Nan Guotian's face was pale, and he was heavily injured. He reluctantly cupped his hands at everyone. Fellow Taoists, long time no see. Old Donkey Ma narrowed his small eyes and looked around shrewdly. He said, "Fellow Taoist Nan, what's wrong? We haven't seen each other for so many years. We old friends thought you obtained a great fated chance, and were in closed-door meditation." Alas, Nan Guotian heaved a long sigh and said, "It'd be great if that was the case. Unfortunately, to tell you the truth, I was planning to enter closed-door meditation in the secret place, and use the abundant spiritual aura there to break through the bottleneck. However, the secret space suddenly collapsed, so I had no choice but to come out. Who would have thought that I would run into someone else undergoing their tribulation here, and get implicated for no reason? What an undeserved calamity. Someone else? When old Donkey Ma heard this, he didn't even want to ask about the collapse of the secret place. Fellow Taoist Nan, are you saying that someone is undergoing their tribulation here? That's right. Nan Guotian clicked his tongue in wonder. We all know that person. She's little friend Mo who obtained Fuyaozi's inheritance. I didn't expect her to still be alive, and even form her nascent soul. Hee. In the current cultivation world, I've never heard of anyone undergoing a tribulation to form their nascent soul. Little friend Mo's future is limitless. What? A few streaks of light flashed across the sky. Taoist Ru Yi and the others had arrived. Taoist Ru Yi, who had a good relationship with Nan Guotian, happened to hear Nan Guotian's words. He didn't even have the time to greet him. Instead, he asked in surprise, "Brother Nan, you said the person undergoing their tribulation here is that little friend Mo from back then?" Old Donkey Ma immediately asked, "Then who are the other people undergoing their tribulation? Why are they undergoing their tribulation here?" Nan Guatian said. They've been in the secret place all these years and never came out. When the secret place collapsed, all of us rushed out, including a few beast cultivators. In the end, we triggered the heavenly tribulation as soon as we came out. Is that so? Old Donkey Ma wasn't interested in their experiences. He looked around the sea and asked, "Where are they now?" They left once the heavenly tribulation ended. Nan Guatian felt that it was a pity. I don't know where those beast cultivators went. As for little friend Mo, they traveled together. I was implicated by the heavenly tribulation and almost lost my life, so I couldn't take care of them. No one doubted his words. Nan Guatian looked like he was seriously injured. He must have really been implicated by the heavenly tribulation. They'd all witnessed the might of the heavenly tribulation. Under such circumstances, it was already good enough that he could protect himself. Old Donkey Ma nodded and smiled at Nan Guatian. Thank you for telling me this, fellow Taoist Nan. I'll take my leave first. Once he finished speaking, he opened his spiritual beast pouch and released the donkey-like spirit beast with snow-white hooves. He sat on it and gently cracked his whip. The two of them quickly disappeared into the horizon. Seeing that old Donkey Ma was the first to leave, the other nascent soul cultivators also couldn't bear it any longer. They either left alone or in groups. Only Taoist Rui remained where he was. Brother Nan. Taoist Rui looked at him and sighed. Has everything been smooth these past few decades? Hee. Even if it was smooth before, it's really unlucky now. Nan Guatian sounded like he was gnashing his teeth. He glanced at Taoist Rui and asked, "What's wrong? Aren't you going to look for them? If you can catch a demonic beast that has just passed the transformation tribulation, it'll be very beneficial. Otherwise, it'll be good if you can find little friend Mo. They've been staying in the Immortal Palace for so long, so I'm afraid they must have encountered many fated chances." Taoist Rui smiled and shook his head. Brother Nan, we can be considered best friends. Why do you need to test me? If it was really that easy to obtain benefits, you wouldn't have stayed here. You would have invited me to go with you even if you had to suffer serious injuries, right? Nan Guatian paused for a moment before he burst into laughter. Taoist Rui, you know me best. Taoist Rui only smiled and asked, "But I don't understand. Why are you speaking up for them, Brother Nan? Could it be that you're friends with each other in the secret place?" Ha! Nan Guatian laughed self-deprecatingly. Friends? If we're friends, I'll also be able to obtain a lot of benefits. We just happen to come out together. Others might not understand what I'm saying, but do you think Taoist Rui doesn't? Who is that old Donkey Ma? He looks loyal and honest, and he usually takes advantage of me whenever he can. I'm not willing to let him take advantage of me. Besides, whether it's those Yao cultivators or those people, they're not to be trifled with. If Taoist Rui trusts me, then don't meddle in this matter. Taoist Rui hesitated for a moment. He was about to say something when he suddenly looked up in alarm. Hasn't the heavenly tribulation passed? Why aren't there any celestial phenomena? Why are there even more dark clouds? Beneath their feet, each wave was higher than the one before. The surging whistling sound almost shattered their eardrums. Above their heads, dark clouds surged violently. It was as if a storm was brewing. Before Nan Guatian could answer, a rumbling sound suddenly rang out in the distance. The two of them turned in the direction of the sound, and their expressions instantly changed. One Leaf Island's defensive formation was on the verge of collapse, as if it would shatter at any moment. What's going on? Nan Guatian was shocked. He knew the scale of One Leaf Island's restriction. It had withstood 4 heavenly tribulations earlier. So why did it look like it was about to shatter now? Boom! A dull sound rang in their ears again. The seawater beneath their feet suddenly parted, forming a whirlpool that was thousands of feet deep. It's the earth caving in. Taoist Rui reacted with a horrified expression. He turned around and saw that not only One Leaf Island, but the coast was also shaking. Is the sky collapsing and the earth caving in? What's going on? Chapter 511. When Mo Tinga woke up, she didn't know where she was. Her resting place was a shallow cave covered with a blanket. It was dry and clean, and there were defensive restrictions set up at the entrance of the cave, which should be Qinshi's work. She remembered that after the heavenly tribulation, she was almost exhausted. Later, she felt dizzy and didn't know what happened. Now it seemed that they had escaped safely. She sat up and operated the spiritual aura in her body. Fortunately, although she hadn't fully recovered, her condition wasn't too bad. Her meridians and dantian were relatively stable, so she must have taken healing medicinal pills. The condition of her body was somewhat unexpected. Not only were the injuries she suffered during the heavenly tribulation healed, but it was also even tougher. It seemed that her body was reshaped by the heavenly lightning. As she was thinking, she sensed someone approaching from outside. Soon, the defensive restrictions around them were opened, and Qinshi walked in. "Tienge, you're awake? How do you feel?" Qinshi smiled when he saw that she was awake. "Pretty good." Emo Tienge stretched her body and looked at him. "How about you? How are your injuries?" "I'm fine. My injuries aren't too serious," he said, stroking her head. "After a few months of rest, I should be able to fully recover." After being tempered by the vermilion bird's breath, his body, meridians, and dantian were much tougher than before. Although he was heavily injured, he recovered quickly. Fortunately, Emo Tienge was relieved and hugged his waist. "Fortunately, we survived." Qinshi answered softly. "Although I'm not afraid of death, being alive is more precious." After surviving a disaster, the two of them increasingly felt that everything they had was worth cherishing. After enjoying the silent warmth for a while, Emo Tienge suddenly asked, "Senior Marshal Brother, if I didn't pass the tribulation successfully and died, what would you have done?" Qinshi, who was holding her hand, paused for a moment before he asked, "Why do you ask?" Emo Tienge sighed softly and said, "Although I've always known that life and death are unpredictable, I've never considered that we might encounter mishaps until that moment." The moment she thought she failed to transcend the tribulation, she had a split second of regret for dragging him down with her. But on second thought, she realized that the most thorough separation was death, and this kind of separation could happen at any time. "Heh," Qinshi chuckled. "If you're dead and I'm alive, I'll continue to live well. But if I die with you, I will not regret it. I think you feel the same way, don't you?" "Yes." Emo Tienge took a deep breath and strengthened her conviction. Walking on the immortal path meant facing death at any time. This was the price they had to pay for obtaining power and lifespan that mortals did not have. However, if one's hands and feet were tied because of this not daring to love and protect one another, one would lose their Tao heart. To be afraid of losing something, and not dare to possess it was the stupidest thing in the world. By the way, where are we now? What happened next? Qinshi sat down next to her and said, "After the heavenly tribulation, some people came to check on the situation. I saw that things weren't right, so I slipped away. Then for some reason, the sea seemed to have caved in. We didn't dare to stop and flew for a long time. When it stabilized a little, we finally found this small island. Us. And Jingxingji." Qinshi smiled and said, "I really didn't expect him to be willing to use the 3 secular swords when you were going through the tribulation. That's a unique skill he has never used in front of others." 3 secular swords? Emo Tienge remembered that when the 9th layer of the heavenly tribulation came, Jingxingji's 3 swords were indeed powerful and scattered a lot of the golden lightning. Without those 3 swords, it was really hard to say whether she could have safely passed the heavenly tribulation. "It's the ancient cultivation sword manual he obtained back then," Qinshi said. "I told you that the method to refine the 3-yang real fire sword and the matching technique were obtained when I went on an adventure with him. At that time, he obtained the still water sword and the ancient cultivation sword manual. The 3 secular swords are the most powerful and the most spiritual aura-consuming moves in the sword manual." Speaking up to this point, he sighed and said, "Time really flies. In the blink of an eye, more than 200 years have passed. Who would have thought that we, 2 small foundation-building cultivators back then, would form our nascent souls today? Even I didn't expect it." Emo Tienge was very curious. "Tell me the truth, what's the relationship between the 2 of you? You never mentioned him before, But you didn't seem to be on guard against him. He seems to be a very heartless person, but he's good to you. Our circumstances are different, and our personalities are different. However, we've known each other since we were little and experienced many adventures together, so we trust each other's characters. Chin, she said, we can't be considered good friends, but we're one of the few people who can be trusted. Based on the way they got along, Mo Tiange wouldn't believe it if someone said they were good friends. The relationship between people was so strange. Some friends couldn't be trusted wholeheartedly, and some people could be trusted, but they couldn't be considered friends. Chin, she smiled again and turned to look at her. In fact, he's also very easy to understand. He was originally a proud son of heaven, but because of his master's accident, he was given the cold shoulder. Although he seemed to enjoy the world on the outside, he actually hated the world on the inside. Therefore, he remembered people who treated him a little better. In my opinion, he was willing to use those 3 swords not because of me, but because of you. Me? Mo Tiange was surprised. I didn't treat him well. In Immortal Palace, he deserved what was given to him, and he wasn't polite at all when they got along. It's because you didn't deliberately treat him well or badly. Although he didn't succeed, he was proud. If you sympathized with him or something, he wouldn't like you. It's rare and valuable that you treat him normally. Qin Shoujing. As they were talking, a voice came from outside. Didn't you just come to see the situation? Why did you watch for so long? You didn't take the opportunity to do something dirty, did you? Qin, she patted his forehead, wanting to hit his head against the wall. I just said a few good things about him. But he's already running his mouth. He stood up, opened the restriction and said expressionlessly, if it were you, it would be called dirty. Jing Xingji was about to retort when he saw Mo Tiange walking over. He said in surprise, you're awake? Yes, sorry to disappoint you. Mo Tiange put on a fake smile. Dirty? How could he say that? Jing Xingji didn't feel anything at all. He said, just in time. You guys came out. He turned around and walked a few steps, but when he found that they didn't follow him, he turned back and urged, hurry up. Mo Tiange and Qin, she looked at each other helplessly and followed him. Sure enough, this was just a small island. Mo Tiange looked around and found that this island was no more than 5 miles in circumference. She could easily sense the situation on the whole island with her divine sense. The sky had cleared up, and it was sunrise. The bright red sun hung on the horizon, and the sea was sparkling. It was gentle and beautiful, completely devoid of the ferocity and malevolence of that day. Jing Xingji jumped onto a rock and pointed in a direction. Qin Shoujing, look over there. Mo Tiange looked in the direction he pointed, but she only saw a small island without any abnormalities. She turned to look at Qin Shi, but she found that he looked a little surprised. Where did this island come from? Yes, where did this island come from? Jing Xingji said. I flew around just now and found that there are several islands around us. The surrounding scenery is completely different from when we came. It's not strange for an island to appear or disappear in the sea, Mo Tiange said. She had gone to Mo Yaoqing's Immortal's Cave in the Eastern Sea before, so she knew a little about the sea. But it's a bit strange for so many islands to appear at the same time. Jing Xingji paused for a moment, then said, most importantly, these islands look very familiar to me. Mo Tiange and Qin Shi looked at him, waiting for him to continue. I said before that I left the celestial pole and went to Yuanzhou, right? The two of them nodded. Jing Xingji went on to say, from Yuanzhou to Yunzhong, I didn't use a transporting formation, but I traveled all the way. Yuanzhou is called the Outer Sea by Yunzhong, because it's separated by an ocean. The Yuanzhou Ocean isn't as desolate and remote as the East Sea or the South Sea. There are many big and small islands in the middle, and many cultivators and mortals live there. Hearing this, the two of them realized what Jing Xingji wanted to say, and were a bit surprised. You mean? Unfortunately, I once stopped on the way to one of the islands. Jing Xingji sighed. Qin Shoujing, we flew south that day, didn't we? Logically speaking, we should be in the depths of returning ruined sea, not Yuanzhou Ocean. One is south, and the other is east. We're very far apart. How could this be? Emotinga muttered. They flew south, but they suddenly saw the scenery that should be in the east. What did this mean? Did they fly in the wrong direction? That was impossible. Cultivators had a much stronger sense of direction than mortals. It didn't make sense that the two of them didn't feel anything when they flew in the wrong direction. Could it be that something interfered with their judgment? I also don't know how this happened. Jing Xingji frowned, his expression grave. But I know there must be something wrong when something is out of the ordinary. Something must have gone wrong. The three of them were silent for a long time before Qinshi said, "It's useless to talk about this now. The three of us are injured. So we'd better wait for our injuries to heal first before we plan our retreat." All right. After thinking for a while, Jing Xingji accepted Mo Tianga's suggestion. Then he said regretfully, "I don't know where those three beast cultivators went. That day, they went through their transformation tribulation. So it was a good time to take advantage of the situation." Why don't you say that day was also a good time for others to take advantage of the situation? Qinshi said angrily. We're already very lucky to be able to escape safely. If we were a moment late, I'm afraid those nascent soul cultivators would have found us. At that time, not to mention our treasures, even our lives would have been in danger. Nascent soul cultivators cherished their lives. They always left a way out, and rarely turned hostile directly. But the situation that day was quite special. After the heavenly tribulation, everyone was seriously injured. If they fought, even nascent soul cultivators would find it difficult to escape. The three of them didn't have any foundation in Yunzhong, and they had treasures with them. Many people were willing to take advantage of the situation, without any future trouble. You're right. Jing Xingji thought for a while, then nodded in agreement. He said, I don't know where that devil cultivator boy went. Later the sea collapsed. If he didn't have any life-saving means, he'd be in danger. Are you talking about fellow Taoist Yang? Mo Tinga said, I think he's probably fine. He's Guifeng Devil Monarch's direct disciple. Not only did he cultivate the primordial devil technique, but he also obtained all of Guifeng Devil Monarch's possessions. With Guifeng Devil Monarch's reputation in Yunzhong, he must have had many life-saving secret techniques. And we're just collaborators with him. Once we leave Immortal Palace, we can't control him anymore, Qinshi said. Let's think about the future. What should we do next? Chapter 512. The three of them discussed for a while, and decided that no matter what happened, the most important thing was to heal their injuries first. Only when their strength was restored could they have confidence. Among them, Jing Xingji's injuries were the lightest. Although his 3 swords of secular consumed a lot of blood essence, his natal flying sword wasn't damaged. Qinshi's body and meridians were all tempered by vermilion bird, so he recovered very quickly. As for Mo Tianga, her injuries were only slightly more serious than theirs. What was more troublesome was that apart from her auxiliary magic weapons, almost all her magic weapons were destroyed in the heavenly tribulation. Fortunately, the place they were living now was quite safe. There were no traces of cultivators on the surrounding islands, so they could recuperate in peace. Several months later, their injuries were basically healed, and they planned to leave the island to see what happened. During this time, Mo Tianga repaired the jade bone puppet. This puppet withstood the 7th heavenly tribulation for her, so it was damaged. However, the puppet's frame was the skeleton of an ancient deification cultivator, and the other materials were also rare treasures in the world, so it wasn't damaged. She just repaired it a little, and replaced it with crystal jade. As for her natal magic weapon, the Heaven and Earth fan, it was a bit troublesome. It wasn't broken. In terms of material, the Heaven and Earth fan wasn't inferior to the jade bone puppet. However, because it faced the heavenly lightning head-on, the Heaven and Earth fan lost all its spiritual aura, so it needed a long time to slowly recover its former spirituality. As a result, she almost didn't have any powerful magic weapons. It was fine on normal days, but it would be a bit troublesome if something happened. But this problem couldn't be solved in a short time. For things like magic weapons, the longer they were refined, the more power they could display. Even if she had a lot of finished magic weapons now, she couldn't use them immediately. Besides, how could a magic weapon that could attract the attention of a nascent soul cultivator be that easy to obtain? Therefore, Qinshi simply told her that since it was broken, she should refine it again. In any case, she had a nascent soul puppet with her, so self-protection wouldn't be a big problem. On the other hand, she would have an advantage if she refined the magic weapon again. Firstly, the higher their cultivation, the better the materials they could collect, and the better their refining techniques would be. Secondly, they had obtained many good things in the Immortal Palace, and they also had a treasure like the spirit-quenching water. It would be a waste if they didn't use it to refine magic treasures. Thus, while nourishing the Heaven and Earth fan, Mo Tiange cultivated the Great Heavenly Thunder technique and refined the Fuxing sword at the same time. Fortunately, they took this Great Heavenly Thunder technique from the Immortal Palace's storeroom, and the Fuxing sword also recovered its former elegance after its devil aura was removed. After a bit of refining, the two of them combined could also display a considerable amount of combat power. Qin Shoujing, Imo Qingwei, come out quickly. Jing Xingji's excited voice came from outside. The two of them, who were cultivating separately, stopped to adjust their breathing. They looked at each other helplessly. What's the matter now? Qin asked as he waved his hand to open the restriction on the cave entrance. Of course it's a big matter. Jing Xingji burrowed his head in and automatically dragged the prayer mat over to sit in front of the two of them. He said, I can finally confirm that we are indeed in the Yuanzhou Sea. What do you mean? Mo Tiange asked. After getting along with Jing Xingji for several decades, she could be considered to have figured out his personality. He was a person who couldn't stay idle. Back when they were trapped in the underground palace, even if he couldn't get out, he still wandered around the underground palace. Now he was even more so. Besides cultivating, he had to fly around on his sword every day, so he knew more things than they did. A few days ago, I flew north and finally saw a big island. There are many residents on this big island, and there are also many cultivators. So what did you find out? A mysterious smile appeared on his face. Guess what happened in the end? Judging from his appearance, it seemed the matter was very unusual. Mo Tiange and Qin glanced at each other and said in unison, If you have something to say, just say it. Jing Xingji wanted to keep them in suspense, but no one cooperated. He was quite depressed and muttered, Aren't you curious? Aren't we asking you? Mo Tiange said casually. If you're not curious, we won't ask. Jing Xingji became even more depressed, but when he thought about their personalities, they only cultivated every day, and one was more dull than the other. He felt relieved. Forget it, they're just two idiots. Why bother with them? A mysterious smile appeared on his face again. You definitely won't be able to guess. We were obviously in the returning ruins sea. But how did we end up in the Yuanzhou Sea? After a pause he said, In fact, the place wherein can be said to be the Yuanzhou Sea, or the returning ruins sea. What did that mean? Mo Tiange and Qin didn't understand. The returning ruins sea is the returning ruins sea, and the Yuanzhou Sea is the Yuanzhou Sea. What do you mean by it can be said to be the Yuanzhou Sea, or the returning ruins sea? Could it be that the two seas can overlap? You're right. Mo Tiange just said it casually. Unexpectedly, Jing Xingji clapped his hands and said, Yes, the two seas overlap. What? Qin was stunned, but he suddenly understood. The subsidence in the heavenly sea means that the Yuanzhou Sea and the returning ruins sea overlap? I guess so, Jing Xingji said. Jing Xingji said, When I found that big island, I learned from several cultivators that when the earth caved in that day, the Yuan Prefecture Sea was also stormy. Many islands almost sank, and the restrictions on countless small islands were broken. Countless people died and were injured. The big island they were on was fine. Although there were casualties, its vitality was preserved. After the storm, they also found that the surroundings were a bit different. The core formation cultivators on the island went out to search, and found that there were many small islands in the surroundings, and the original island's positions were also slightly shifted. They spent several months to contact other big islands, only to find that things were unusual. The west of the archipelago, which should have connected to the Yunzhong Inner Sea, became a vast sea, and they couldn't reach Yunzhong. Yuanzhou was in the east of Yunzhong. After passing the Yuanzhou Sea, they could reach the Yunzhong Inner Sea, which was also the main way for cultivators to travel between the two places. After all, the long-distance transporting formation was very expensive, and cultivators below the core formation realm often couldn't afford it. Unlike the celestial pole, which was isolated, there were Yuanzhou and Shaoyang to the west of Yunzhong. The sea between them wasn't dangerous. Since ancient times, they had many connections, so they were also quite familiar with each other's situations. The path between Yuanzhou and Yunzhong was often visited by people. Now that it was suddenly cut off, it was quickly discovered. Emo Tiange and Qin Shi glanced at each other. They both felt this matter was very strange. Didn't that mean the entire Yuanzhou Sea was moved to the returning ruined sea? This was unusual. Although they heard about small islands disappearing in one place and suddenly appearing in another place, they were only small islands after all, not the entire sea. Just the disappearance and reappearance of small islands was already strange, let alone the entire Yuanzhou Sea? What about Yuanzhou continent? Emo Tiange asked. Yuanzhou Sea suddenly changed to returning ruined sea. But is Yuanzhou continent still in its original position? Jing Xingji shook his head. I don't know. Although it's called a big island, it's only relative to the small island we're on. The highest cultivation level on that island is only a core formation cultivator, so we can't immediately contact Yuanzhou continent. I heard that some people already went in the direction of Yuanzhou continent, but the news hasn't come back yet. After a long time, seeing that the two of them didn't speak again, Jing Xingji couldn't help but ask, "What are you thinking? What else can we think?" Qin Shi said faintly, "In any case, we're about to leave. We'll go and see what's going on later." It wasn't easy to find out such shocking news, but in the end, these two people's reactions were so cold. Jing Xingji was a bit dispirited. All right. Call me when you're ready. I'm going to cultivate." Right after he said that, he stood up and left. After he left, Emo Tiange asked after a while, "Senior Marshal brother, is it really possible for this kind of thing to happen?" Qin Shi shook his head and said, "The world is so big that nothing is too strange. Who knows? But what?" he said with some hesitation. "I always feel that this matter is very strange. Ever since we left the Immortal Palace, everything has been linked together." Emo Tiange was slightly stunned. "You mean, as soon as we left the Immortal Palace it collapsed, affected by the restrictions of the Immortal Palace? That independent space probably couldn't be preserved, and has probably disappeared by now. After we came out, the matter of the heavenly tribulation was put aside. Right after that, the middle of the sea caved in, and the Yuanzhou Sea suddenly changed into the Sea of Returning Ruins. These things are all linked together. It's too much of a coincidence to say that they're unrelated." "Are you saying that these incidents might be related?" Qin Shi shook his head. "It's just my intuition. These things happened at the same time. It's too coincidental." What he said was reasonable. However, Emo Tiange tilted her head and thought for a long time, but she still couldn't figure out what the connection was. After all, the whole sea suddenly changed to another place, which was too unimaginable. "It can't be a space crack, right?" she said whimsically. Could it be that a space crack suddenly appeared between the Sea of Returning Ruins and the Yuanzhou Sea, overlapping the two seas? Anything is possible. Qin Shi didn't think it was absurd. There are too many unimaginable things in this world. Even if we're nascent soul cultivators, we only know a little. Emo Tiange agreed with this point. The higher one's cultivation level, and the stronger one's strength was, the more insignificant one would feel. It was said that nascent soul cultivators had the ability to fly in the sky and burrow underground. But compared to the world, their strength was just a tiny ant. Emo Tiange really didn't know how terrifying the power of those powerful cultivators, who could contend against the world in ancient times was. Thinking up to this point, she couldn't help but wonder to what extent did one have to cultivate to achieve the so-called Great Tao. Unconsciously, she already became a nascent soul cultivator. In the eyes of the world, she could be considered to have stepped into the Great Tao. but she felt it was far from enough. What if she advanced to the deification realm? Would she still find herself very insignificant? Was there still a path after she advanced to the deification realm? No one could answer these questions. Only when she reached that step would she know the answer. Several days later, the three of them left the island and headed east. If the Yuanzhou continent and the Yuanzhou Sea moved, they could reach the Yuanzhou continent by heading east. As for the north, they didn't dare to go there for the time being. If they were still in the sea of returning ruins, heading north would lead them back to Yunzhong. Right now, in the eyes of the high-level cultivators in Yunzhong, they were human-shaped Qianquan bags, and everyone knew there were a lot of treasures inside. If nothing unexpected happened, after they arrived in the Yuanzhou continent, Emotienga and Qin, she planned to return to the celestial pole with the transporting formation Jing Xingji used to get here. Chapter 513. Jing Xingji had been to the Yuan Prefecture Sea and the Yuan Prefecture continent once. With him leading the way, the three of them were familiar with the way. Sometimes they used the transportation formations, and sometimes they flew across the sea. In less than 10 days, they arrived at the Yuan Prefecture continent. Fortunately, the Yuan Prefecture continent was still at the east of the Yuan Prefecture Sea, and nothing unusual happened. Yuan province is different from Yunzhong's celestial pole. There are no mortal countries here, and there are very few cultivation sections. Jing Xingji explained, there are only immortal cities here. Both mortals and cultivators rely on immortal cities. This sounded somewhat similar to the Northern Lin Kingdom in Yunzhong, but there were also differences. These immortal cities have strict hierarchical city rules, and individual cultivators are insignificant. It's unlike the Northern Unicorn Kingdom's Devil region, which relies on individual prestige to build a city. An individual cultivator is insignificant? Emotienga raised her eyebrows and asked, could it be that even nascent soul cultivators are nothing? Of course not. Jing Xingji answered. But nascent soul cultivators only have corresponding rights and obligations in the immortal cities of Yuanzhou continent. Everything has to be done in accordance with the city's rules. Unlike the celestial pole and Yunzhong, who have independent and transcendent statuses. I see. This was the first time Emotienga and Qin she had heard of this kind of thing. Ever since they started cultivating, cultivators in the celestial pole had been instilled with the concept that the strong were revered. Those with high cultivation levels could decide the fates of those with low cultivation levels. If they reached the nascent soul realm, they could do whatever they wanted. This kind of rule, where city rules were supreme, and even nascent soul cultivators were not exempted, was unimaginable to them. Jing Xingji continued. It's said that the immortal cities of the Yuan continent have strict city rules, but they're also relatively lax. As long as the stipulated tasks are completed, the immortal cities won't care what the cultivators do. Even if there's a conflict with the cultivators of other immortal cities, it's mostly settled privately and won't involve the immortal cities. That's strange. This didn't sound like the clear-cut hierarchy of the government, nor did it sound like the close relationship between sects and clans. Instead, it was somewhere in between, an alliance purely based on interests. Yeah, I was also very surprised when I arrived in Yuan province at the beginning of the year. Jing Xingji scratched his head and added, also, all the immortal cities in the Yuan province belong to an alliance called the Yuan Province Commerce Alliance. Merchant Union? Is the business in Yuan province very prosperous? Exactly. The Yuan province is a famous trading continent. Shops are everywhere, and there are many merchants traveling between the continents to sell all kinds of goods. In Yuan province, the status of merchants is very high, unlike in Celestial Pole and Yunzhong, where a person's wealth will only make people drool over him. Only a person's cultivation is the most practical. A thought emerged in Qinxi's mind. In that case, as long as I have money, I can buy a lot of rare things in Yuan province? That's right. The people of Yuan province claim that as long as you have money, you can buy anything. Of course, this is a bit of an exaggeration, but it is indeed easier to buy rare items in Yuan province than other places. After learning about Yuanzhou's general situation from Jing Xingji, Emotianga and Qin Shi had a general understanding of Yuanzhou. However, a few days later, they arrived at the largest celestial city in the western part of the Yuan prefecture, Chongling City. The two of them had their eyes open wide. Yuan province was much smaller than Yunzhong. It did not have abundant cultivation resources, and it had a large population. In the beginning, the cultivators living in Yuan province had a hard time. However, they were quick-witted and thought of a way to travel between continents and sell all kinds of items, earning a lot of spirit stones. Over time, trading became a tradition in Yuan province. The wealth of Yuan province even surpassed that of continents with abundant resources like Yunzhong. Nowadays, there were 5 major celestial cities in Yuan province. In the center was Yuanzhou City, where Yuan province's merchant union was located. To the west was Chongling City, to the east was Luomei City, to the south was Xiangyang City, and to the north was Lingxiao City. These 5 major celestial cities were the most prosperous places in Yuan province, and they were also the places where Yuan province's merchant union had the greatest influence. Similar to the rules of the celestial cities, Yuan province's merchant union didn't have the power to directly order the celestial cities under it. They were a loose organization united by benefits. Each celestial city sent representatives to form a chamber of commerce for the members of the merchant union. Each celestial city paid spirit stones to the merchant union every year as operating expenses. This fee wasn't much, and the accounts were all open to the public. Each celestial city, no matter how big or small, could check the accounts. Under the organization of the merchant union, all the major celestial cities in Yuan province were united, exchanging what they needed and advancing and retreating together. Because of this, Yuan province's trading market was well organized. Chaos in prices and unclear transactions rarely occurred. Moreover, because of the existence of the merchant union, they had equal status when negotiating with the various powerful forces in Yunzhong. It was only after they entered Chongling City that Mo Tiange and Qin Shi understood why Yuan province was called the trading continent. The whole of Chongling City was actually a huge market square. There were crowds of people rubbing shoulders on the incomparably bustling streets. There were shops and shouts everywhere. Many goods that could be considered precious in the celestial pole, and even in Yunzhong, were casually displayed outside. Mo Tiange saw with her own eyes that an aura refining cultivator's stall was filled with medicinal pills. This was unimaginable in the celestial pole. For cultivators, medicinal pills were scarce. Moreover, this person was only in the aura refining realm, so it was easy for others to covet him for having so many precious things. In the celestial pole, individual cultivators only put 1 or 2 bottles of medicinal pills on display. Moreover, most of them only had 1 or 2 bottles. In addition, the 3 of them were nascent soul cultivators, so they didn't conceal their breaths. Coming together like this, no one paid them any attention. These low-level cultivators merely gave way to them when they arrived. After roughly looking at the situation in Chongling City, Mo Tiange asked, "Where should we go to get information?" "Naturally, we'll go to the city lord's mansion," Jing Xingji said. Although this Yuan province is governed by rules and interests, having a high cultivation level isn't completely useless. For some information, low-level cultivators had no way to obtain it, so they could only ask high-level cultivators. And the high-level cultivators were naturally in the city lord's mansion. The 3 of them walked all the way, and soon arrived at the city lord's mansion. The city lord's mansion of Chongling City wasn't very gorgeous, and was mainly simple in style. However, they could all see that the restrictions in the city lord's mansion were very brilliant and definitely not ordinary. "Seniors, what can I do for you?" The guards of the city lord's mansion asked politely when they saw them coming. These guards were only foundation building cultivators, but they were neither servile nor overbearing in front of nascent soul cultivators like them. Although Jing Xingji didn't return the greeting, his attitude was polite. "We came to look for a fellow Taoist. Little fellow Taoist, please make some arrangements." As he spoke, He handed over 2 mid-grade spirit stones. So that's how it is. The foundation-building cultivator took the spirit stones openly and said with a smile, "Thank you for your reward, senior. Seniors, please follow me." Emotienga and Qin were a bit surprised. Just saying that was enough? If they had bad intentions, wouldn't they be able to easily sneak into the city lord's mansion? They looked at Jing Xingji, whose expression was calm. The two of them thought perhaps this was Yuan province's custom. After following the guard into the city lord's mansion, a cultivator dressed neatly and looking like a steward immediately came to receive them. Under the guidance of this cultivator, the three of them arrived at a small hall. After ordering a servant to serve tea, the cultivator politely cupped his hands and saluted the three of them. Junior has already reported the purpose of Senior's visit. In a moment, an elder will come to receive you. Seniors, please wait here for a moment. Jing Xingji nodded, and also threw him 2 mid-grade spirit stones as a reward. When the cultivator left, there were only the three of them in the small hall. Emotienga asked, "How did we get in so easily? Since this is the city lord's mansion, shouldn't it be more heavily guarded?" Jing Xingji shook his head and said, "What's the use of being heavily guarded? In Yuan province, no one will have any ideas about the city lord's mansion." "Why? Because it's useless," Jing Xingji said. "To seize the city? What's the use of seizing it? Every cultivator, including the city lord, has to be bound by the city's rules. They have to do the corresponding things before they can get the corresponding rewards. This has been Yuan province's tradition for tens of thousands of years. Since there's no difference between being a city lord and an individual cultivator, why should we seize the city? What if there's a personal grudge?" Qin Shi asked. "If that's the case, wouldn't it be very easy for people to sneak in?" Jing Xingji smiled. Yuan province's immortal cities don't care about personal grudges. Everyone has to deal with their own matters. Besides, do you really think the city lord's mansion is as easy as tofu? The restrictions here aren't simple. Once you enter, you'll be controlled by others. Emotienga nodded. "You're right. Although I don't know what kind of restriction it is, it's indeed powerful." As they spoke, the three of them sensed a cultivator approaching from the outside. The cultivator's momentum was very strong, so he should be a nascent soul cultivator. Sure enough, before long, a cultivator in his 30s with a thin face stepped through the door. This cultivator was in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. Judging from his appearance, he shouldn't be too old. He had a peaceful expression and a smile on his face. His gaze swept over the three of them, and he seemed a bit surprised. He cupped his hands and said, "I'm Yanfeng, an elder of Chongling City. Greetings, fellow Taoists." Emotienga and the other two stood up to return the greeting and said their names. After greeting each other, the cultivator named Yanfeng took a seat across from them. He asked with a smile, "Fellow Taoists, is this your first time in Chongling City? Is there anything I can help you with?" Emotienga and Qin weren't familiar with Yuan province's matters, so Jing Xingji was the one who spoke. Jing Xingji said, "Elder Yin is too polite. To tell you the truth, we've indeed encountered some troubles. We have no choice but to ask the city lord's mansion for help." "Oh, fellow Taoist, please speak." Jing Xingji paused for a moment. "First, may I ask if Elder Yin knows about the tsunami that suddenly appeared in returning ruins several months ago?" Yanfeng nodded. "Yes, low-level cultivators might not know about this, but there's no one who doesn't know about it in Yuan province." Jing Xingji's eyes flashed with excitement when he heard this. He asked, "So there must be something unusual about the tsunami in returning ruins, see?" Yanfeng didn't answer immediately. His gaze once again swept over the three of them. He suddenly smiled and said, "I can probably guess why fellow Taoists came. Fellow Taoists are cultivators from Yunzhong, right?" Jing Xingji didn't directly answer yes or no. He smiled and said, "Elder Yin is really sharp. Since that's the case, I'll tell you the truth. Several months ago, the three of us were in returning ruins C. Unexpectedly, after the tsunami, we lost our way and found ourselves in Yuan province C. This was too inconceivable, so we simply came to Yuan province to see what happened." "Hee hee," Yanfeng chuckled. Sure enough, we haven't released any information about this matter. However, fellow Taoists are all nascent soul cultivators, so there's nothing to hide. He paused for a moment then said, that tsunami didn't just happen in returning ruins sea. At the same time, there was also a rainstorm in Yunnan Province sea. About several days later, the storm stopped, and we discovered that Yunnan Province, along with the surrounding seas, had moved. Chapter 5:14. Move to another place? This statement was very similar to the information they heard before. Yunnan Province Sea and returning ruin sea overlapped, so Yunnan Province, which was originally located east of Yunzhong, naturally changed its position. Yes, Yin Feng heaved a sigh. During those days and nights of storms, all the islands in Yunnan Province Sea suffered heavy losses. Many small islands disappeared forever, and I don't know how many mortals and cultivators died because of the storms. They already knew about this matter on their way here, so they were all silent now. Although these people's lives had nothing to do with them, they saw with their own eyes that some small islands with weak defenses were completely destroyed. Whether they were mortals or cultivators, they were all so insignificant in front of the power of heaven and earth. Yin Feng smiled at them. Let's not talk about this for now. Do you want to return to Yunzhong? Yes, we do. Jing Xingji's expression didn't change at all. However, we originally wanted to rely on our cultivation levels to hunt some high-level sea beasts when we went deep into returning ruin sea. Since we encountered this kind of coincidence and came to Yunnan Province, we might as well take this opportunity to find some fated chances in Yunnan Province and then return to Yunzhong. Upon hearing this, Yin Feng's smile became more amiable. It's great that fellow Taoists think that way. Although Yunnan Province's products aren't as good as Yunzhong's, we've been doing business for many years, so we have much more resources for cultivation than Yunzhong. Especially for us nascent soul cultivators. We don't care about ordinary treasures, and precious ones are hard to find. Even if others have them, they rarely take them out. Presumably, this is also the reason why you took the risk to go deep into returning ruin sea. In a few days, there will be a nascent soul trade fair in Chongling City, so you can stay and take a look. Is that so? Jing Xingji looked happy. That's perfect. Thank you for telling us, Elder Yin. Yin Feng waved his hand and smiled. Fellow Taoist, you're too polite. Cultivators in Yunnan Province are all merchants. We make friends and make money with harmony. Upon hearing what he said, Emotienga and Qin Shi glanced at each other. Both of their gazes were somewhat mysterious. Whether in the Celestial Pole or Yunzhong, they'd seen countless nascent soul cultivators, but they'd never seen one like Yin Feng. Out of 10,000 cultivators, there might not even be one who could cultivate to the nascent soul realm. Therefore, nascent soul realm cultivators were all proud and arrogant. However, this Yin Feng did not feel the slightest bit of arrogance. However, I wonder if all the cultivators in Yunnan Province are like this? After pausing for a moment, Yin Feng said, as for the next piece of news, you should be mentally prepared. Emotienga and the other two also became nervous when they saw how serious his expression suddenly became. Jing Xingji said, please speak, Elder Yin. Yin Feng said, actually, even if you want to return to Yunzhong, it's still a little difficult. Oh, why is that? Yin Feng paused for a moment and said, the entire continent suddenly moved. It's unbelievable. If it wasn't for the fact that it's right in front of us, even nascent soul realm cultivators like us, who are very knowledgeable, would find it hard to believe. But there's something even more unbelievable. Looking at the three of them, Yin Feng said slowly, Lian Yunzhong is no longer in his original position. What? The three of them exclaimed in unison. Jing Xingji was shocked and asked, may I ask fellow Taoist Yin, where is Yunzhong right now? Did he suddenly change his position like Yuanzhou? Correct. Yin Feng sighed and said, several months ago, after the storm, us nascent soul cultivators gathered together to investigate what happened. The first thing we discovered was that Yuanzhou suddenly moved to the Sea of Returning Ruins. Later, we discovered that even if we followed the new route, we still couldn't reach Yunzhong. Yanfeng continued to look at the three of them and said, "The Sea of Returning Ruins is located south of Yunzhong. We spent some time to determine Yuanzhou's new position, but after we planned the new route, we still saw the boundless sea and didn't see the continent in Yunzhong." Jing Xingji frowned and said, "Elder Yan, isn't there a transporting formation between Yuanzhou and Yunzhong? Even that doesn't work?" Yanfeng shook his head softly. "I don't know how much fellow Taoist Jing knows about formations, but transporting formations can be said to be one of the most complicated formations. A random transporting formation is fine, but a fixed-point transporting formation, there are too many things that need to be calculated between two transporting formations. If something goes wrong, the transporting formation won't work normally. Among them, distance is the most basic factor. It affects how much spiritual aura a transporting formation needs, how complicated the formation is, and so on. Whether it's Yunzhong, Yuanzhou, or Shaoyang, all fixed-point transporting formations are arranged according to the distance between the two places. Long-distance transporting formations require a lot of spiritual aura, and are especially complicated. After we discovered the abnormality, we tried to use the transporting formation to contact the Chamber of Commerce in Yunzhong, but we failed." Jing Xingji's expression changed slightly. He glanced at Emotienga and saw her nod, so he knew what Yanfeng said was true. Nevertheless, Emotienga's expression became even more unsightly. Transporting formations weren't very useful for personal use. Among all the formations, she was the least familiar with transporting formations, so she always ignored this possibility. Since the transporting formation from Yuanzhou to Yunzhong was destroyed, what about the transporting formation from Yuanzhou to the celestial pole that Jing Xingji discovered before? Could it still be used? Thinking deeper, Yuanzhou suddenly moved to the Sea of Returning Ruins, and Yunzhong also disappeared from its original position. Then, was the celestial pole also in its original position? Thinking of this, she smiled bitterly inwardly. She originally thought leaving Yunzhong would only take a few years, or more than 10 years to travel. But she didn't expect the passage back to the celestial pole would suddenly collapse. In order to return to the celestial pole, she spent many years preparing. She successfully reunited with Qin Shi, met Jing Xingji, and learned the safest way to return to the celestial pole from him. But in the end, this kind of unimaginable thing happened. Why was her journey home so difficult? If this continued, she would leave the celestial pole for almost 100 years. Moreover, the biggest problem was that she didn't have much time left. When she was building her foundation, she was schemed against by Wanderer Ziwei in Ziwei's Immortal's Cave. This eccentric senior gave her 200 years. Originally, she thought 200 years wasn't a short time, and was enough for her to prepare. So she didn't care too much about it. But no matter how she thought about it, she never expected that she would encounter so many things. She couldn't even return to the celestial pole, let alone complete Wanderer Ziwei's task. She still had more than 50 years, but now, she didn't even know where the celestial pole was. But we also used the transporting formation to go from Yuanzhou Sea to the continent. If the distance doesn't change, or if it doesn't change much, the transporting formation can still be used, Yanfeng said. Therefore, the short-distance transporting formations in Yuanzhou and Yuanzhou Sea have no abnormalities. Jing Xingji was silent for a long time. In the end, he heaved a long sigh. In that case, we won't be able to return to Yunzhong in the short term? Yes. Yanfeng also had a worried frown on his face. Our Yuanzhou is a peddling continent. We don't have abundant resources, so we can only prosper today by relying on peddling. But now, we don't even know where Yunzhong is. If this goes on, Yuanzhou will definitely decline. Our merchant union doesn't dare to disclose this information. If it gets out, I'm afraid it'll cause turmoil in Yuanzhou. Yuanzhou's situation was very special. It didn't have abundant resources and relied on peddling to make a fortune. So it was destined to rely on Yunzhong's vast territory and abundant resources to maintain its prosperity. But now Yuanzhou was isolated in a corner. It didn't even know where Yunzhong was, So how could it do business? Now that Yuanzhou had just suffered a great disaster, and the merchant union was powerful, they could still conceal this information. But after a long time, how could they hide it? Apart from the various immortal cities, Yuanzhou's peddling merchants also traveled to various continents all year round. This couldn't be stopped. If the merchant union used forceful methods, it would violate Yuanzhou's peddling rules. These rules had been in place for tens of thousands of years, and were the foundation of Yuanzhou's foothold. Once they were broken, there would be endless troubles. Should they conceal the information and maintain temporary stability? Or should they uphold the rules and uphold Yuanzhou's tens of thousands of years of tradition? These high-level cultivators couldn't make up their minds. For now, other than finding Yunzhong as soon as possible and re-establishing contact with Yunzhong, there's no better way, Yanfeng said with a bitter smile. Yanfeng smiled bitterly. I have the same goal as you fellow Taoists on this point. This is also the reason why I told you all of this news so frankly. Jing Xingji glanced at him. Elder Yan, do you hope that we can help you find Yunzhong's new location? Yanfeng shook his head. After discovering that Yunzhong disappeared, our merchant union had already started on this matter. However, you're all fellow nascent soul Taoists and you're also from Yunzhong. Maybe our merchant union needs to borrow your strength for something. Speaking up to this point, Elder Yin once again showed that kind of amiable smile. Besides, only by making friends can we amicably make money. Looking at this Elder Yin, the same thought emerged in the three people's minds at the same time. Sure enough, he's from Yuanzhou, and has the nature of a merchant. Elder Yin. Qin Shi, who had been silent all this time, suddenly asked, I have a question. I wonder if Elder Yin can answer it. This, fellow Taoist Qin, please speak. Qin Shi paused for a moment then said slowly, Returning Ruins Sea has always been known for its dangers, while Yuanzhou Sea has always been very peaceful. Now that the two seas have overlapped, will this new sea inherit the dangers of Returning Ruins Sea, or the tranquility of Yuanzhou Sea? Upon hearing this question, Yanfeng's expression turned solemn. I didn't expect fellow Taoist Qin to notice this problem. This matter is also very important to our Yuanzhou, but right now, I can't answer it accurately. Yanfeng paused for a moment then asked, All of you came all the way from Yuanzhou Sea. Did you encounter any attacks from sea beasts? Jing Xingji shook his head. We didn't stop to rest on the way, so we didn't pay attention to this matter. Even in Returning Ruins Sea, it wasn't easy to see high-rank sea beasts. The higher the rank of the sea beasts, the more territorial they were. Usually, there were only one or a few high-rank sea beasts in a sea area. Yanfeng said, Our merchant union still hasn't received any news that a large number of high-rank sea beasts have appeared. However, the number of high-rank sea beasts has indeed increased compared to before. Right now, it's only a few months before it happens, so it's hard for us to conclude. We can only wait and see the situation. If that's the case, Yuanzhou Sea area was vast, and there were many cultivators and mortals living on the islands in the sea. If his guess was correct, Yuanzhou would face an even more difficult crisis. Not only would it be unable to continue trading, but it wouldn't even be able to guarantee its most basic safety. At that time, not to mention maintaining today's prosperity, even the immortal cultivation system would completely collapse. If it lost its most distinctive system, and relied on its poor natural resources, how could Yuanzhou establish itself? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.